So
He's been usually right about.
yeah, he scoots in.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it's 6 o'clock and welcome to the September 17th meeting of the governing body. I call this meeting to order. If you will give your attention to Councilman Kell, who will provide the invocation, stand as you are able, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
All right. So this one's in honor of my father. I lost him a few years ago, and it's called the Plumber's Prayer. He was a master plumber, so I just want to kind of honor him a little bit. Lord, thank you for this job and the blessings it provides. May you watch over me this day and keep me safe from harm. Create in me a willing spirit and a happy heart. Grant me the ambition to work hard and give me the strength to finish what I have started. May my hands always be prepared to help lighten others' loads. And finally, Lord, remind me that the quality of my work is a reflection of you to those around me. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, roll call. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller. Here. Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz. Here. Banks. Kell.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
Hofer. Here. All right, we have 9 present with Councilmember Banks absent.
Okay. Move on to agenda item number 2, the appointments. Madam Clerk?
A is an advisory council reappointment of Arkels Wolf Roby to the City of Topeka Americans with Disability Act, advisory council for a term ending October 4, 2026. B is an advisory council reappointment of Joe Charest to the City of Topeka Americans with Disabilities Act ADA advisory council for a term ending September 30, 2026. C is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Delmatrius Heron to the Topeka Planning Commission for a term ending September 30, 2027. D is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Joseph Mock to the Topeka Planning Commission for a term ending September 30, 2027.
Okay, you know, have heard the appointments as read. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve by Councilman Dobler, second by Councilman Kell. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz, Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yeah.
and Dobler.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, motion's carried and the appointments are made. All those who are in attendance this evening for their appointments, would you please stand so we can recognize you and thank you for your service for the city. And I'm glad you're here this evening. Thank you very much. Okay, move it to item 3, the consent agenda. Madam Clerk.
A is the approval of workers' compensation claim settlement in the amount of up to $50,000 to resolve the claim with Dustin Ebert on a full and final basis for a work-related injury sustained by the employee while engaged in normal work duties. B are minutes of the regular meeting of September 10, 2024, and there are no applications.
Okay. We've heard the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Move to approve by Councilwoman Ortiz. Second by Councilman Dobler. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz, Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
and Duncan.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, motion's been carried. Move to agenda item number 4, action items. Madam Clerk.
A is a resolution introduced by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez establishing a date for a public hearing concerning the adoption of a plan pursuant to the Neighborhood Revitalization Act, KSA 12-17-114 at SEEK.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the governing body. Dan Warner, our Planning Division Director, will lead us through this item.
Good evening, Mayor, governing body. So we're here tonight to talk about the update to the Neighborhood Revitalization Plan. It expires at the end of the year, so that's why we're going through this process. We do it every 3 years. So the process so far has been, we had a discussion with the governing body in late spring. Since then, we've met with all the taxing entities but one. We'll finish that up this week, and it's been well received at all the taxing entities. There's 9 other ones involved here, and we got some good questions as well. So the next step is for the governing body to approve a resolution that sets the public hearing. Once that happens, we'll have the public hearing. If the city adopts the plan, then we'll ask the other taxing entities to sign interlocal agreements by the end of the year. So just to be clear, what we're asking here is to approve the resolution and set the public hearing for October 15th.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions for Dan? Deputy Mayor, do you have your hand up? Or are you just adjusting your camera? Okay. All right. Is there a motion?
Move.
Okay, motion from Councilman Dobler, second by Councilwoman Ortiz. Call the roll, please. I thought I heard you. Was that Karen?
Hiller.
Okay. I stand corrected. It was Councilwoman Hiller.
Okay, Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz, Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Hofer.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, the motion carries.
Okay. Move to action item B. Madam Clerk.
B is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez concerning adoption of the 2024 edition of the Standard Traffic Ordinances, amending sections 1015, 010, and 020 of the Topeka Municipal Code and repealing original sections.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Amanda Stanley, our City Attorney, will lead us through this item.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. As discussed last week, this would adopt the newest edition of our standard traffic ordinances. These are used by our police officers to issue citations within city limits for the traffic code. It's updated annually in response to the legislative session. I'm happy to stand for any questions. There is a memo in the agenda packet as well for the governing body and the public reviewing all changes.
Any questions for City Attorney? Anyone online? No? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Councilman Duncan. Second by Councilman Dobler. You call the roll, please.
Okay, Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz, Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Hofer. And Hofer.
Yes.
We have 8 yes, the motion carries.
Motion's carried. We'll move to action item C. Madam Clerk.
C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez concerning adoption of the 2024 edition of the Uniform Public Offense Code, amending Section 90508 of the Topeka Municipal Code and repealing original section.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Amanda Stanley, our City Attorney, will lead us through this item.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. This was discussed last week. This will adopt the newest edition of the Uniform Public Offense Code, which is annually updated in response to the legislative session. We reviewed all the changes last week. There's also a memo in your agenda packet for the public and the governing body reviewing those changes, and I am happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for City Attorney? Seeing none on this item, is there a motion? Motion to approve by Councilman Kell. I'll second the motion. Madam Clerk?
Councilmembers Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
it's gone. Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
and Hiller.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Move to action item D. Madam Clerk.
D is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez imposing a real estate lien pursuant to KSA 808C upon certain lots and pieces of ground in Shawnee County, Kansas, to pay the cost for utility services where such payments to the city have not been made due to neglect, failure, or refusal to pay.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Nicole Malat, our Deputy Utility Director, will take us through this item.
Good evening, everyone. This is the ordinance we discussed last week. A revised ordinance was placed along with the agenda item last Thursday, I believe. There's been no changes since then. There are 130 accounts for $108,076.26 on the ordinance as presented. We will still take payments up until noon on Monday, September 30th. Then I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Nicole? Motion to approve by Councilman Dobler. Is there a second? Second by Councilwoman Ortiz. If you'll call the roll, please.
Council members Ortiz?
Yes.
Kell?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
Hofer?
Yes.
Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Council members Hiller?
Yes.
And Valdivia Aquila.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Move to action item 4E. On 4E, we have 2 people signed up to speak on this item. Madam Clerk, will you read 4E, please?
E is a resolution introduced by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez regarding the upcoming Shawnee County tax foreclosure sale.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Amanda Stanley, our City Attorney, will lead us through this item.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. So every year, this county councilor's office puts together the annual tax foreclosure sale. There are numerous lots that go into that sale every year. State law allows the city to protect itself to an extent by evaluating those properties that are for sale and seeing if there are any with past due specials, and give special bidding privileges to a city in order to protect itself against the loss of those past due specials. And this upcoming tax sale, there are lots that have significant past due specials, particularly in the subdivision known as Lawrence Bay. Because of that, a resolution was asked to be drafted to bring before you to consider allowing the city manager to evaluate those properties and bid as he seems appropriate, if you believe that those would be appropriate properties to purchase. For exact details about that, I would happily turn it over to Planning Director Rhiannon Friedman and Assistant City Manager Braxton Copley for specific details about particular properties.
Okay, I'm going to allow the public comment before Rhiannon takes the table. So I have Mr. Patrick Delap. Patrick Delap. Patrick Delap. Okay. Have Mr. Henry McClure.
Your Honor, it'd be nice to hear what they had to say. You know, I might want to tailor my public comment to their comments, but I'm not running the meeting.
Yeah. It's at my discretion if you would prefer that. I don't have an issue with that.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Okay. All right. Rhiannon?
There have been 19 parcels that the city has identified that would be eligible for development because they have infrastructure such as water, sewer, gas, and electric to them. And so that is why we chose those 19 parcels when asked what we would like to sell. And the item in front of you is whether or not to allow the city to protect its interest under Kansas law because of the special assessments on those 19 parcels, and we'll gladly stand for any questions that you have.
Okay. Any questions or any comment from the governing body? Okay. Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Mayor, I don't know, were you going to want to do public comment first and then have us come in for comment? How did you want to work that?
Okay. Back, yeah, back and forth. Okay. Mr. McClure, why don't you step forward?
I'm happy. It's a Pullman.
Yeah.
Henry McClure, Topeka, Kansas, doing my best to conform. It's a shame if today's the first day of the rest of your life, okay, I could live with that, but it's a shame that we got this far, and it's really not the fault of anybody in this room. It really goes over to the county. And the fact that they're not adhering to the policy that's right on their website, and I'm pretty sure it's state law, that every lot that it's going to be auctioned 1 year if it's vacant, if it's a commercial building 2 years, and if it's a homestead 3 years. And we can't sit on inventory, and we got to get new money going on in this community, and we have to have every lot every year. If nobody develops on it or pays the taxes, I mean, we've got to do things different. We can't keep doing the same thing thinking we're going to get a different result. I don't really like the idea of the city owning more real estate, but I do think that it's a new day today, and we got to figure out who the best deal is for private enterprise to get this thing done. And I'll bet you $1 there's somebody out there that will do it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I will close with this, that I have asked the Attorney General, Chris Kobach, to review the procedures. And thank you to Ken Corbett for sending that to Chris's attention. And I did have an opportunity to speak with him about this, but I don't believe that the county is doing service to our community by deciding and picking and choosing. We just got to have one way to do it, and doing it that way every time. Ken Corbett was telling me the other day that counties, it's automatic. If it's vacant lot, boom. But good luck with your decision, and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. It's the only person we have signed up to speak on this issue from the governing body. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I will not be supporting this resolution, and I want to tell my colleagues that have tried, that are bringing this forward right now, and it's just going to come down to the votes, that, I know everybody is trying to do the best they can on the governing body to try to get some kind of resolution for a mess that a developer caused that owns huge swaths of property across this city, that is a mover and shaker within this city, and here we are. I think that this is a very, very slippery slope that we are on. And again, I know my colleagues are trying to do the best they can with a bad situation, but I think that we need to let the state know that this is an example where we need the ability as municipalities to go and sue these LLCs, these developers that end up deciding that they don't want to pay. And we know that taxes are at the breaking point for so many of our average residents, but yet we have one of the biggest movers and shakers in this town that in the next round and the next vote, I'm going to be asking some questions so that the public can get a sense of how much he really owes. I think that we're, again, on a slippery slope. I think that there is some disagreement on how my colleagues and I view the land bank, where, whatever is obtained of these properties is going to go into the land bank. I know that there's a variation of definitions on usage of land banks. But to me, this is not a depressed area that you're looking at. This is an area that went bad because the developer didn't want to pay up and has let everything slide into the ditches. And now the city is doing the best they can, but it's something that I do not support. So thank you, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Councilman Ortiz and then Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question. So, right now, the city manager does not have power to authorize to buy any of this, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, on other properties, when people go in and they bid on them, and there's an outstanding amount of specialties or taxes or whatever, they or they buy them and they switch hands, and then they go back and they take that and they send it to the collection office under their name. Will that be done in this?
I believe you're talking about two different types of special assessments. So special assessments for nuisance abatements or demoed properties under state law can specifically be sent to collections. That would have to be done before the tax foreclosure sale. If it's
Right.
not done before the tax foreclosure sale, then on the date of the sale, it wipes. Special assessments for utilities under state law, as Deputy Mayor said, is not allowed to be sent to collection. So that is not specifically authorized under statute like it is for nuisance abatement.
Okay, so we would have to change that in order to,
State law would have to be changed, you are correct.
state law, okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. This is in my district. It has been an issue for 15 plus years. There's 100 and probably 130 or more undeveloped lots. The city's not totally blameless in this. Nobody that's on the council now was there when this was done, that I know of, or staff, but we forced a large subdivision to be built with all the streets and sewers and water, hundreds of lots, in a town that really doesn't develop more than 50, 60 lots a year. We also allowed the city allowed the developer to put everything on specials: streets, water, sewer. That traditionally has not been done. Most developers will ask for specials on one of the utilities or streets and pay for the rest of them up front, and then that goes in the price of the lot. That wasn't done here, so when this all occurred before 2008 hit, and the developer was out of business, and those lots have been sitting there ever since. I talked several months ago about the problem we face in this community, and we're facing it right now. We'll talk later about the budget. It's a tough one. It's tough to get revenue from property tax here, and part of that is because the value of the community, the taxable value of this community is very low. Topeka is like the 5th or 6th largest city of the Class 1 cities. We're about the 4th largest city in area, and yet we are the 11th city in terms of taxable value per capita. And if you think about that a little bit, the only way we can get out of that spiral is to increase the value of this community. And the only way we can increase that value is to build new houses. Obviously, commercial, industrial would be great as well, but most cities increase their value by increasing the amount of residential houses that are built in their community. This is a perfect opportunity. These 19 lots are buildable. They either have utilities or are close to utilities. And, this is a part of town where the houses that are built there will pay significant property taxes. I know we have the land bank, and it's great. We need to develop in all parts of town. We need to redevelop the inner city. There's lots of things we need to do, but we need to do all of them. We don't just need to focus on one thing. And this is something that could quickly increase the value of our community. So I'm in favor of this. This does not mean we're going to go out and pay $50,000, $60,000 a lot. This means the city will go, and whoever bids the highest on the lot, the city can decide whether they want to pay that price and take the lot. Some of these, the last tax sale, some of these lots went for $500, $1,000, $2,000, something like that. So we're not talking a ton of money, and I'm sure that the staff will exercise good judgment on what that cap ought to be. There's this resolution, there's one after this that includes the owner as a developer. I would like to see both of these pass. If the one we're talking about right now passes, that would allow us to go ahead and purchase some of the lots that aren't owned by the majority owner out there, and that would be fine. If the other resolution doesn't pass, then the city can look at purchasing all of them. But I think we've come to the point where we've got to make a decision. And let me be clear about one thing. No matter what happens with either of these resolutions, the back specials are gone as of Thursday. When these go to tax sale, we lose all of the back specials and the back taxes. So it's not a matter of if we do one or both of these things, we're giving up something. It's already gone. So these aren't great ways to handle these type of things, but at this point, it's the best we can do for this community. And if we can start building out there, it's like anything else. Once you start building, people see that, more developers become interested. Again, this is a subset, 19 lots out of probably 130 out there. If we can make this work, I think there's a real chance that we can redevelop the rest of the hill up there, and that needs to be done. And that's all I've got, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple quick comments. There was a letter. There was a request made of the Attorney General for some clarification on the duties of the cities and the county from a citizen. The county councilor sent a letter back, and I want to read two pieces of it. It was a really good letter. He'll never let me live it down that I'm praising the county councilor's wonderful letter, but it's true. But there's two things I want to point out and why I support this and think it's important. First sentence is, last year's tax sale was instructive of the carnage it causes to the taxes and specials owed. The 22 parcels only brought $16,959 out of the $1,007,261 owed. The remaining $990,000, $302,000 were wiped off the books pursuant to KSA 792804. And to Councilman Dobler's point, that's going to happen to these properties. So for us, it's how do we make sure that we can recoup some of those dollars back? And by the way, we had to split that $16,000 with the other taxing entities. But the second part is, as explained below, the city of Topeka wants to maximize its ability to collect these specials in an orderly fashion rather than have Shawnee County or the city itself dump all of the lots at a single tax sale for pennies on the dollar. Nobody likes that we're in this situation. And a lot of what's happened now happened years ago, really out of our control at this point, and even out of some of the majority of the owners' control, because it's been passed to several people through the years since its development. So from my perspective, I believe it's our job to step in, maximize the best we can. And I think based on the conversations we've had with staff, they know they're not going to go, quote unquote, overspend for these. There's a cap, but we're not going to tell them what that is, right? That's not how you go into these sales, let the world know what you're willing to bid. But if we can get those properties, get them into our programs, whether it's the land bank or whatever, and generate actual revenue, we're not going to recoup every nickel, but we're going to recoup way more than the $16,000. And I'll finish with, and if I'm wrong on one or two of these, then I will apologize up front, but I don't think so. I don't believe any of those lots have been developed since that last tax sale. I went out there, I looked around, tried to make sure. The majority of them were purchased by out-of-state individuals who, to Councilman Dobler's point, at maximum paid $500 to $1,000, and they're still sitting there. And guess what they're doing? They're not only not being developed, but the specials are starting to add up again. And I guarantee you on some of those lots, we're going to be having the same conversation in 5 years about them having to go to a tax sale. It's a trend we've got to stop, and so this is just one more way I think we can do it. We got to get creative sometimes, and I think that falls into the vein. So those are the reasons that I can support this and at least give us a push forward to get some development going. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. This has been really tough, and I really appreciate the work and the kind of the mental gymnastics that a lot of people have gone through to try and figure out a solution. We've been involved in talking about it more. We've had some executive sessions on this, and the public is not that familiar. If it was okay, I wanted to ask probably Councilman Dobler across the table to talk about with what Councilman Duncan just talked about in terms of having all these different individuals buy all these lots and then nothing happened. What the comparison would be between just leaving them alone on the tax sale and doing nothing, going and buying them all at the tax sale, or your alternate proposal that is going to follow this in terms of how they compare of having a single developer that could take a chunk of the lot and redevelop it all, in terms of what you were talking about that's so important to have the rest of it then follow.
Councilman Dobler.
I'm not totally sure I understand your question, but I will say, I'll give a good example of the lots that were sold in the last tax sale. And again, I live not too far from here, so my wife and I generally walk the empty streets. The grass is slowly but surely growing up in the cracks. We walk that almost every day. And after that tax sale, I noticed up the hill, and this is the part that has no utilities close to it at all, not the area that we're considering right now. I noticed some realtor signs up on a couple lots. I thought, that's kind of strange. And about a week later, I get a call from the realtor. And he's representing some buyers from Florida that now own these 2 lots that are 1,000 feet from the nearest electricity, and there's no gas up there. And they just figured that out. And he said, and this is a key, I think, he said, we contacted Westar to see if they'll run power up there. And basically Westar said, no, we will only run power when there is a developer that has a number of those lots that makes it worthwhile, because it's just not worthwhile to them. And unfortunately, power up there is all underground, so it's the most expensive. But that is the key. There is no way that individuals are going to develop those lots. It's going to take a developer, which the city would do if it falls under this first resolution, and a developer that's the current owner would do if it falls under the second resolution. So I hope that helps a little bit.
That helps. Now, when in the middle one, the one we're considering right now, where if the city went ahead and bought them, just going to feed your words back to you. Did you mean that the city would be the developer, or the city would find a developer? I just want everybody to understand what we're looking at.
And city attorney may help me with this, but I think the goal would be they will get into the land bank. The city would put out an RFP for one single developer for all of the lots. Take the best response to that RFP. The city would expect payment for each lot that's sold, some sort of payment. That payment will go back into the land bank fund. So,
okay, so
preferably
likely
would cover the cost that we incur up front here, plus increase the value of the land bank.
And in both cases, because the public maybe hasn't seen that map or hasn't concept, the thought is that the 19 lots that have been selected by you all, I guess, and staff, are contiguous enough that it would provide a core for redevelopment?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Would fill in whatever you want to call it.
I don't believe we picked them. I believe there were suggestions made to the county councilor who actually selected the lots because they handle the tax sales. So, yeah.
Just trying to get out a feel for how it would work. Thank you.
Councilman Gill?
I'm still just a little leery, after the hotel situation. I know we were told different things by different people about the hotel, and true or not on those things, it's kind of gotten to a thing now where we have a hotel and we're trying to figure out the best way to handle that. And so owning more properties is kind of leery to me. It's aggravating to see people that have money, that have used the city and, rented our property and ran it to the ground, or not paid their taxes, or expect us to pay for things that they can afford to pay for as a developer. And it's, from my point of view, it's just aggravating to sit there and say, why do we keep on letting this happen? So I think we need to really look at things and say that, put responsibility on the people that it's on when we can. I know at this point we can't do the specials because as of Thursday they're gone, the back specials. I am for this going in the land bank. I think anything that can help the land bank is good, because I understand, my philosophy of the land bank is it's to help the low and moderate income neighborhoods. But if we can, if someone wants to give us a $500,000 house that we can flip and turn around and put that money right back in the land bank, I know, we're not in the business of doing that kind of stuff, but it's money that goes to the land bank. So, there's that positive. I think my big thing is, if we had developers right here, right now, lined up at the public comment saying, hey, I'm ready to take care of this and start going within the next year and have this, here's my plan, I'd be a lot more for it, because we could kind of do this and it could turn back right into the exact same thing again, by letting a group buy them at the tax sale, or we buy it and we sell it to a developer. We can kind of almost be right back in the same boat again. So I'm just very leery of all this, and like I said, I go back to the hotel. It's like fool me once kind of situation. It's scary to, especially high-end property. And part of me is thinking, if it hasn't been developed, and I understand there's been back specials and this and that, but if someone hasn't been motivated enough in the last, we're looking at 26 years, or 16 years now? I'm sorry, my math's not working right now. To go out there and do stuff, it's kind of what's going to keep someone from going to go do something now. I see the positives, I see the negatives, and it's a tough decision to make. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Duncan and then Councilman Doper.
So I will say that, Councilman Kell, and just a reminder to everybody, once any property is put into the land bank, it then has to follow the rules of that land bank, which were established by this governing body and by the land bank board itself. And some of those include things like a timetable of development, or else it reverts back to the land bank so they can get it back to a developer. Things like nobody who has back taxes, back issues, code compliance issues. So there's a fairly healthy list of backstops, if you will, that once we put the property in the land bank, just because they were put differently than the land bank where they now apply to those rules. And so the land bank will follow those, and any developer who steps in won't be able to sit on it for 5 years. The land bank's going to say, no, if you're not doing this in 18 months or whatever this deal we've made, you got to give it back, and those kind of things. So if that helps a little bit to let you know that those rules will be followed.
Well, thank you for that reminder. I did not remember that, but thank you for reminding us of that.
Councilman Doper?
Yeah, I probably just second what Councilman Duncan said. The other thing, the difference between the hotel and property is, the biggest issue with the hotel for us right now is the ongoing operating expenses. And there are literally none on vacant property. But I think as part of the land bank's RFP to find a developer for this, all of the things that Councilman Duncan just said would be in place. So there would have to be guarantees that they would develop. There'd have to be timelines like we do with regular development agreements between the city and developers on other properties. So, good points. I understand your concerns, but I think we have a better chance of success this way than just letting these go to, 19 different people potentially and continue to sit there.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Draw out another question or fact, I guess, if I may, across the table. One of the reasons that land banks fail is because they have a good idea, but nobody buys the land. They don't find any developers. Don't have to name names, but can you share with all of us and the public whether there are some developers interested in this property should the land bank get it?
Well, the land bank hasn't had those conversations. I mean, I think we know there's been several who came to us months ago and said, if you do anything with any properties, we'd be happy to be involved in those conversations. In these public meetings, they came and told us that. I can also tell you just in general, the land bank is having active conversations with, and they're all local developers from the small person to the larger groups about being partners in the land bank program itself. So we're building those relationships now so that as we acquire other of these properties, we already have a nice pipeline of people who we trust to start moving forward with those. So
Thank you. I just wanted to draw that out. Thank you.
Councilman Dobler and then Councilwoman Hofer.
Thanks, and just to add on to that, in this part of town, there are developers that build houses. There's house builders there and other property developers. Right now, they don't have the property inside the city limits to build, so they are going out. If you look at 53rd and Wanamaker on the west or the east side, that's in the county. Great subdivision going in there. If you look at what's happening up north on 46th Street, east of US 75, those are the areas that these developers would be here, but they just can't get control of the property. So,
Councilwoman.
There were a lot of things I was looking at, and the positives, I have to look at the positives. One of them being it has the roads, it has the water lines, these lots have electricity, everything's close. It is such a positive for any developer that would get these lots, things they do not have to do. It's already there, it's already set up. Then I have to look at the other big positive. They get them built, they get them sold. We're getting property taxes. Utilities are getting money. The utilities pay us franchise fees. It all just starts backfilling in. So I have to look at it and think positively that this is the best way going forward to take care of a problem that has been, I guess you could say, festering for a long time and not doing us any good. Hopefully it'll increase our tax base. So I'm going to support it.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Can you tell me just ballpark if the city ends up, working this to where the votes are there and then it gets the properties, 19 parcels, maybe less, will be developed. How much will the housing approximate be worth on these parcels individually? What will be the ballpark housing cost for, someone interested in buying out in that area?
Councilman Dobler.
maybe staff could answer that. I can if,
Yeah, $300,000 to $500,000, I think is fair.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Is that in the range of the classification for affordable housing? Just a question.
I don't believe so, but Councilman Dobler had something he wanted to add to your question, I believe.
Yeah, I think, part of the goal is we think these, based on the last tax sale, $500 to $1,000 to buy these lots, they are worth, if they're developed and a builder comes in to build, those lots are worth $40,000. once somebody's committed to building there. And I think the idea would be the city would get that portion, they would get the value of that lot back, and that money would go back into the land bank, and that could be applied to housing anywhere in the city.
Further questions? Comments? If I may, I will be supporting this resolution. I think that it was stated earlier that probably no one on this governing body was directly involved with any decisions made that brought us to where we are today. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't think anybody intentionally thought if they tie up all this property, then they'll have a big say in what goes on and be able to direct the growth of this city. I think at the time even it seemed like they were making some attempt to salvage some decisions that weren't for the best at that time, as we got the historical piece from Councilman Duncan. But I think we have to continue to look at that. If, in response to Councilman Kell's comments, you're right, we have to learn as we go along, and I think that this is part of our learning process, that we've learned that there is an opportunity now for an option that maybe was not pursued before, and the work that has been done by the governing body to bring us to the table to offer this does give us a window for some of the recouping of those dollars lost as we batted the issue back and forth over a number of years. It, I think, is a responsible move on the part of the governing body to look at the opportunity to generate housing that would generate increase in property taxes that can be reutilized in other parts of the city that could address Deputy Mayor's concerns about LMI and affordable housing. So I think all in all, it shows a good faith effort by the governing body to bring to this body this resolution to have this good open discussion and see what could happen if we're able to move forward on this. So I want to thank the governing body, especially Councilmen Dobler and Duncan, who have done an awful lot of work on this, and with Rhiannon and Braxton, who have really tried to scratch out, I think, the best alternatives that we have before us. So again, thank you, and I will be supporting the resolution. Any further comment?
Mayor.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you. I will share. I mean, I've really struggled with this too. I do appreciate how much work people have done on it, and I will learn a little more maybe on the next item as well. But I'm more satisfied than I was as we went along that there really aren't any bad guys in this. Just a variety of things didn't work out, and we, as a city, have been learning how to do development. It wasn't something that we been very intentionally involved with, and we need it now. I forget the number exactly. Most of us were at the JADO meeting last week. Timing is important too, I think, but we approved something on the lines of support to our local businesses for adding like 360 good paying jobs in the next few years. So the timing to get this going is also pretty compelling to me at this point. So thank you again for all the work. I am still nervous about it, but I will support this.
Councilman Kell?
I think I kind of, with the reminder of the land bank rules, that we have a little bit more say in what goes on there, kind of swayed me a little bit. Then thank you for the reminder on that. Because, like I said, I just, as you said, I think we're still learning here, so sometimes you gotta take that leap of faith again and learn from that time. So I think that since we'll have a little more control over it, I'm more in favor of it.
Okay. So, Councilman Duncan.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilman Duncan, second by Councilman Dobler. If you'll call the roll, please.
Okay, Councilmember Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
No.
Ortiz.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes, with Councilmember Valdivia Akala voting no. The motion carries.
Okay, thank you for the discussion. Move on to action item 4F.
F is a resolution introduced by Councilmembers Neil Dobler and Spencer Duncan regarding Lawrence Bay.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. I would turn this over to Councilmembers Dobler and Duncan to lead us through this item.
Councilmember?
Thank you. I'll kick this off, and Councilman Duncan can add to it. This really is an alternative to the city purchasing these lots up front, as was in the resolution that we just passed. This would essentially designate the current owner, Clayton Real Estate, as the developer. It would, the action of the city council would forgive the back specials, and keep in mind that those are going away on Thursday anyways. But the owner, the current owner and future developer would pay in full the back property taxes. And then between now and the end of this year, city staff, the developer, and we've designated the Public Infrastructure Committee, it could be another committee as well, would negotiate what this development looked like. So part of the issue is we don't have a development agreement in front of us. So we need to get, we need to figure out the timeline. The developer will make a payment to the city for each of those lots. We don't know what that is yet, but and that would constitute part of the back specials that we are forgiving. We would have other things in that development agreement that would address some of the items that Councilman Kell is concerned about, schedule, what happens if this falls through, those type of things. So there'll be a lot, if this passes, there'll be a lot of work to do in the next 3.5 months. But if we get there by December 31st, then we will have a developer who will begin building on those lots next year, and we will be able to see really probably faster improvements out there than if the city goes through the process. What if it doesn't happen by December 31st? The developer, the current owner, has agreed to give those lots, donate those lots to the land bank. So we would end up in the same place as we will if we buy them, only we won't expend any funds at that point to get the lots. And then we would be going down the road, just as we discussed with the earlier resolution, to find a developer and develop those lots. Again, this isn't ideal. None of this is ideal, but this really gets us in a good spot. And I think that clincher, and really it's what got us to this being on the agenda tonight, was Mr. Klossman agreeing that if we can't come to a developer, if we can't sign a development agreement by December 31st, then he will donate those lots to the city. And I think that shows a really good faith effort on his part to make this work. And I might point out, I know we'll probably get into a little bit more history here, but this whole development was originally financed through a local bank. And when the developer went down in 2008, as a lot of developers did across the country, that bank was left holding all of these lots. I don't believe they paid their back specials and taxes at the time. I don't think they'd been paid because the developer wasn't paying them. He was gone. The bank didn't want the lots. They put them up for an auction, and they went different directions. But Mr. Klossman living out there, having a vested interest in this area, bought those with the idea of those lots not being distributed out to 100 different people. 2008 was a tough time for everybody, and that development didn't occur as he'd hoped. But we're in a place now where we can hopefully realize probably the dream of developing that area. If anybody's been out there and you drive up on the hill, these are not the lots that we're looking at in the 19, but eventually when we get the rest of it developed, it's some of the most beautiful property in Topeka for residential housing. So there's a really good chance at this point that we can make this work. I want to commend, before we get any further, the city attorney on just a lot of work on background here and what we can do to make this successful. Without that, we wouldn't be here. So I am definitely in support of this. Again, I think it ultimately, if it all falls through, we're back to exactly where we are with the resolution that we just passed, except the city doesn't expend any funds. And with that, that's all I've got, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Duncan?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple quick things. Tonight we're talking about this housing. And I think sometimes we have these conversations and it gets forgotten that this is a piece of a puzzle that has to all fit together. Yes, these are not affordable housing developments, but there's a reason that staff, Quinn and Rhiannon and myself, are working frantically to get the trust fund up and running, that we've spent a year getting the land bank operational, that the planning commission and the committees that have come together on that are looking at ways to build multifamily housing and what those policies would look like within infill developments, right? That the city manager and I have been talking along with staff about what we can steal from other communities to bring in to encourage development in all of our communities, because infill development is not happening and it has to happen, right? We are having those conversations, just not as publicly as we are as this one tonight. And you're going to hear more of that over the next 12 months or so as we bring some of those forward. But this is what's in front of us tonight. So I do want everyone to understand this is part of a big piece, and the other pieces are not getting forgotten. They're just not on our agenda today. But we're really down to 3 scenarios with these properties. They can go to tax sale, which we've had that discussion just a few minutes ago, and what happens if we don't take some advantage of that. We can work out a deal with the developer, which is not a total forgiveness, and let's be very clear about that. There will be money paid on some of this back to the taxpayers as part of those negotiations. That's very clear in this agreement. And then he will be able to move forward and actually develop them in a timely manner, or we get the properties back. I mean, that's what we're down to if we can pass this tonight. So it actually takes us from the one option we just passed to 3 options, which actually give us a much more favorable outcome in this package than the first one, especially because it saves us some money on the upfront side of which the first one has us expending a little bit of. So I think this has been a lot of great work, a lot from Councilmember Dobler. I appreciate the developer continuing the conversation, not slamming the door on us when we wanted to have these conversations. It does matter, and I think this gives our colleagues on the committee a chance to have those conversations and try to bring us something before the end of the year. So again, we've all said this now several times. Nobody wants to be here in this situation, but it's our job. That's why we sit in these chairs, is to make the best of it for the citizens of Topeka. So that's why I put my name on this, and I'm supportive of it, and have been glad to do what we can to get there. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Dobler?
Yeah, just to add on, so with this resolution, unlike the last one, there would be money paid by probably sometime tomorrow for the back taxes. So the specials go away, but the back taxes will be paid, which we won't get in either of the other 2 scenarios. And then, as Councilman Duncan said, some future payment for each of the lots to be negotiated. Thank you.
You've got a hand up.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. I'm having a bad signal out here, and so some of what Councilman Duncan said broke up. So I think for the public, this is very confusing. I know it's not meant to be that way. I am asking for it to be spelled out, specifically the 3 options that Councilman Duncan just spoke about. But before that, I want to understand how long has Klossman owned this Lawrence Bay? I need to find that out, and I also need to find out exactly how much is owed by Klossman to the city of Topeka, which is the taxpayer.
City Attorney, I'm going to have to defer to you.
I will have to defer over to our Director of Planning and Development.
Sure, yeah. So if we're talking about the 19 lots that we're discussing tonight, the total amount of taxes and back specials due are $997,000.
I'm talking about the whole thing.
That will take me one more minute, but I can give you that answer if you give me a second. So that amount, as of June, I will say those numbers incrementally increase over time, is with the uncollected specials, the penalties, and the back taxes, is $6.7 million.
So he owes the city of Topeka, which is the taxpayer, $6.7 million.
That's property taxes as well, included.
Okay. And how long has Klossman owned the property of the totality of Lawrence Bay?
Yeah, 14, 15 years. I'd have to get you the exact number.
14 or 15 years. And tell me, when these 19 lots go up on the tax sale, how much is going to be lost in specials and back taxes on these 19 lots?
Specials are gone.
So in one of the options that's being discussed, I think there's a difference, right? So in one of the options that's being discussed, if you were to lose all of the back taxes and the historical specials that are tied to the property, it would be $997,000.
Okay. And then for me to understand, as well as to the public, because I'm getting emails right now that don't understand the three options, I think it's only fair that, since again, the majority of this is taxpayer money that we're talking about possibly utilizing, that we need to get an understanding about the three different options that we're looking at tonight on how to deal with Lawrence Bay properties.
Okay. I'm going to defer to the city attorney and ask her if she wants to go through that, or that the
I will
that council members
do my best, and if I misspeak on behalf of Councilman Dobler or Duncan, I am sure they will interrupt me. I believe option one is do nothing. Let the property go to the tax sale. Whoever buys it, buys it. That would be potentially the loss of the $900 and something thousand Rhiannon talked about, minus whatever is bid at the tax sale, and then the 40% roughly, which is our taxes, we would get back of whatever that percentage is. The second option would be to authorize the city manager, as was just done, to purchase lots at the tax sale. He could purchase all or none of them, depending on what is the best economic value of that. So that would be purchasing the lots. And then we, as the city, would pay whatever was bid on those lots. We do not pay our own specials back to us. And then the third option, as I believe it, is the one that has been introduced by Councilman Duncan and Dobler. And they walked through it a little bit, but basically the resolution, as they asked it to be drafted, would forgive the back due specials of the developer, who is the LLCs that have the primary shareholder of Mr. Klossman. It would forgive those. They would need to pay their back due taxes and specials in order to have their properties pulled from a tax sale. Those have to be paid tomorrow. So if they were not pulled, then those properties would go to the tax sale. They would then authorize the city manager to notify the county councilor the past due specials have been forgiven. The resolution would waive the RHID policy requirement that there be no outstanding back due taxes or specials prior to application, to allow the developer to submit the lots in Lawrence Bay for a potential RHID consideration. It would then also direct bond counsel and the city to work with the developer to figure out the best process of decreasing the annual yearly special assessments remaining on the property through creation of a CID. That's been done in other cities such as Wichita, I believe. And then the Public Infrastructure Committee would negotiate with the developer for the terms of the payment for the forgiven past due special assessments on the tax sale, on the lots that would have been in the tax sale. That would be the development agreement that Councilman Dobler and Councilman Duncan talked about. If the Public Infrastructure Committee cannot reach an agreement that is approved by the entire governing body by December 31st, 2024, with payment rendered to the city in whatever amount is negotiated, then lots will be donated by the developer to the city's land bank no later than March 3rd, 2025.
Okay, so let me just get some clarity. Are we talking about the developer in this resolution that's in front of us right now being Klossman?
Correct.
Are we talking about the RHID, which just came down the pike from the state and overriding it so that he can be the developer?
The city's RHID policy prohibits anyone with back due taxes or specials from applying for an RHID. This would waive that specific resolution requirement of the governing body to allow him to apply for an RHID with the city.
So he gets to, but nobody else gets to.
That would be.
Is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay, and so do we know for a fact that there's going to be an agreement at the end of December? And if not, then my question is this resolution as well for just the 19 lots, or is this talking about the totality of Lawrence Bay?
This resolution only forgives the back due specials on the 19 lots that were in the tax sale. It would allow RHID application on behalf of all of the lots. As to whether or not an agreement would be reached, I believe that's best directed to Councilman Dobler.
And just let me ask this. So the rest of the lots would still continue to get all kinds of fees assessed to them for not paying taxes, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay, and that would still be owed to the city?
Yes.
Okay. And is Mr. Klossman at the city council meeting tonight?
I do not believe so.
Okay. I'm just going to say in a nutshell, again, I understand my colleagues are doing the best they can, but I think it is above and beyond the pale that RHID, which just started in its development, my understanding, in the past year or so, maybe a little bit over, and all the requisites that people have to go through or developers have to go through, and then we're cutting this guy, and I don't mean this towards my colleagues, but basically we're cutting this guy a deal and letting him waive and letting him call the shots on how this is going to happen. And again, I cannot support this. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Kell.
Okay, you said the 6.7 was everything he owes plus the specials, correct? Sorry, yeah.
Yes, that's correct. That's property taxes, specials, and penalties.
Okay, and then what, let's just take the specials out. What is everything else on the Lawrence Bay?
The property taxes are closer to 1.1 million. Okay. It's the specialties, it's the penalties and the uncollected specials that are the largest amount.
Okay, and then Councilwoman Valdivia-Alcala brought up a good point. How much more does he owe the city across the board in this situation? Because like I brought up the last time that people keep on coming to us for relief on stuff and they're getting it on the back end. And this could be a situation to me where this man can walk away with $1 million, $2 million on the back end of this deal. And that's where it's like, it's getting a little more murkier the more we talk with me on what's the best thing for us. But I'm sorry I didn't let you answer that question. But to me, I'd like to know what he owes the city in total across the board, not just in Lawrence Bay.
Yeah, I think that this conversation is focused towards these properties, but I would say that it's my understanding that these are the focus of where the back due taxes are owed at. I don't know that there are others in other situations.
That's something that I'd like to know, because if he owes us another $5 million across the board, then to me that influences my decision.
Right. Council member, we can get that information. We do not have it at our fingertips. This resolution is laser focused on these 19 parcels, and specifically the ones that are owned by the Klossman controlled LLC is what the resolution in front of us tonight is about.
My thing on that, though, is when it goes the whole entire city across the board, it impacts my decision on this moment. Because if I'm rewarding him here, who says he's not trying to go do it on the next set of property and the next set, and we're allowing someone to take advantage of a situation. And, you know, as the councilwoman said, the RHID was not set up for this specific purpose, and now we're kind of gonna skirt around it. And then also, again, like I said before, people that with the money to do stuff are asking for relief from the city, and we're hurting as a city.
City manager.
Mr. Mayor, if you would allow, I believe Mr. Klossman's attorney is here and would speak to Councilman Kell's questions if you would allow us, sir.
Jennifer?
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know how it turns on. Okay, go ahead. Hi, I'm Jennifer Sork. I represent Clayton Properties amongst the other LLCs and can help, I think, answer a few of the questions in front of the governing body tonight. Directly to your questions, Councilman, the Clayton entities across the board employ about 500 people in our city, in all jurisdictions for the most part, and have approximately annual property taxes of $3.5 million that have been paid, that are due, that he's been a businessman in this community for 40 years. And nothing other than Lawrence Bay has been outstanding. To add an additional correction, I think will be helpful. Rhiannon had mentioned 15 years, but the Lawrence Bay lots were actually sold to him in 2015, and most of those specials and past due taxes had been accumulated by the number of banks that had been involved, primarily one local bank. And so they could not find resolution. They tried to actually sell them themselves and were unable to do so. And so Jim said, hey, let me try and see if we can't work out a deal. Over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, we've worked with the city, numerous conversations, numerous attempts to get something worked out, and we feel like we're in the best place. And as Councilmember Dobler mentioned, it is Jim's commitment, if we can't work out a deal, that we will just hand those lots over back to the city to try to make that the best development. He's personally committed. The neighbors out in that area are personally committed to trying to figure this out. As of right now, it's just not developable, and there are huge barriers, and which is going to require a pretty major financial investment up front in order to make it developable.
Thank you, Jennifer. Councilman Dobler?
Yeah, I think part of the question was answered. We were talking about 6 million back owed and 997 specifically on these 19 lots. What is the total owed?
Yes, specific to the 19 lots that are being discussed in the tax sale, it's $997,000.
And all of that will be gone as of Thursday. Either way, if we purchase them or it goes straight to tax sale. With this resolution, what portion of that 997 is back property taxes?
It is approximately $165,000.
Okay, so that portion would be paid by Mr. Klossman under this resolution. So it's the only one of the 3 options that we actually get something up front, and then again we get something later with the negotiations. I guess I would like to say, I know Mr. Klossman's kind of a private individual, doesn't ask for a lot of attention. I think, you know, it's easy to see this one specific issue that didn't start out in his lap, but he took on. As Jennifer mentioned, he has a lot of employees in this city, pays a lot of taxes. He doesn't just buy property and sit on it. He's redeveloped Holiday Square. That was a big investment. One close to my district and in Councilman Duncan's district is 29th and Fairlawn. If you think back to what that looked like 10 years ago, it wasn't very good. And compared to what's there now, it's really pretty amazing. He's built a hotel there, which has really added to not only that part of town, but quality hotel inventory in Topeka itself. several years ago, he made made $1 million gift to Park and Rec for the Midwest Health Aquatic Center out at 21st and Urish for the betterment of the community. So there, and I could go on. There's a list of downtown buildings, Brewbank, Crosby, Dibble. I mean, he's done a lot of positive development in this community. He just doesn't get out there and take a lot of credit for it. So, this was an unfortunate decision on a lot of people's part that led to where Lawrence Bay is right now. And we can start to get that headed in the right direction. We've already started with the previous resolution, but this one's even better. So I would support that, and I would make a motion to approve.
I still have a question.
A motion to approve and a second. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I want to know if the waiver there was preferential treatment given here, and if other applicants that may have similar track records apply and are denied because they do not meet all of the criteria, does that leave the city vulnerable to lawsuit?
The front part of your question kind of cut out and you froze up, but if you want to repeat it again for the city attorney.
And can you hear me?
Yes.
We can now. I just heard
Okay.
the last part about vulnerable to lawsuit. If you could repeat
If the RHID waiver is provided for this particular instance, for what's happening and this passes and the RHID waiver passes, with him getting the waiver, does this leave the city vulnerable to lawsuits from other entities that may have similar background as Klossman has, that he is possibly may receive a waiver on? And if other entities that are applying for RHID have similar smears or whatever you want to say on their record, and they are not even allowed to apply because they do not meet the criteria and the city does not allow them a waiver, are we leaving ourselves open to lawsuits for preferential treatment or
Sorry,
different?
I was thinking for 1 second. You're always vulnerable to lawsuits. Individuals can always sue you. The question in each case will be, did the governing body make a thoughtful deliberation, and was there a rational basis for making the decision that you made? In this instance, you've made lots of deliberations on the record. In the future, if those came before you, or if a developer asked for a waiver, you would need to make this same kind of deliberation and decide.
So you're not really giving me an answer, because I'm asking if we are susceptible to lawsuits.
I think the base answer is yes.
Okay, so then my next question is, or maybe it's more of a commentary, is that I serve a low to moderate income district. And in my low to moderate income district, no folks, because folks don't have this kind of money, but would ever receive this kind of treatment and this kind of special treatment. So even though Mr. Klossman and whoever the movers and shakers are in this town that do so much benefit in the way of hiring, understand that is the workers that are doing the work, right? And so we could open up that whole can of worms, because business owners need workers. It's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. And so my district will never buy into this with such, and what appears to me is blatant special treatment. No matter what he's done, no matter what anybody has done, it should not get to the level where it is. And so again, thank you, Mayor, for letting me speak. Thank you.
Councilman Dobler.
Question for the city attorney. Is anybody with any kind of back taxes, can anybody ask the city council for a waiver?
Yes, and as a small point of clarification, we have made those waivers in the past for lower income area properties where there are lower amounts of back specials. We have a policy in place on when those can be waived for the purposes of economic development. This is a much larger scale, however, which brings it to the appropriateness of the governing body. However, if there is a property, for example, in a low to moderate income and you've been mowing it for several years and it had lots of code cases and you want to transfer it, but there's a lot of back to specials and you can't afford to take that on, you can apply to the city. The property maintenance director does have to write a memo explaining the rationale on why it would be appropriate for a waiver of those taxes, and that does occur now.
So that has been approved in the past?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
City Attorney, but you just said those are separate from the specialty.
Some of those can be put on collections or they can be waived in its entirety, and it's a fact dependent.
But you said none of the specialties could. And now you're
Specials for
saying- and now you're saying-
nuisance, no, there's multiple kinds of specials. That's why this is confusing. Specials for nuisance abatement or demo of a house, which are what you more predominantly see in a low to moderate income
Right.
neighborhood. Those can be waived or they can be sent to collections, but that can happen. Infrastructure cannot be sent to collections. So the only way to waive a special would be to forgive it for infrastructure. Did I make that more confusing?
These specialties that Mr. Klossman has
Cannot be sent to collections because
cannot
they
be
are
sent
for
to collections,
infrastructure.
right?
Correct.
Right. If I may, Mr. Mayor. I can understand what my colleague's saying because I didn't vote for 29th and Fairlawn. I just didn't vote for it, and I'll tell you why. Because this gentleman just got another LLC, and he went to building out there. Does it look good? Yes, it does. Is it bringing in money? Yeah, a little bit. It's not what he said it was, so how do we know? I don't even know where to start with this gentleman. How do we know that he's not going to get this property under somebody else? How do we know that? And with all the properties that he has, we're just going to forgive him. If I'm correct, Amanda, we're just going to forgive him on the properties that we purchase.
No, this resolution would be to forgive them on the 19 that are in the tax sale, so you
Right.
would forgive them.
Right.
But we wouldn't purchase them because then he would pay the back taxes and then the lots would no longer be in the tax sale.
May I answer that question?
Councilman Dober.
I think what sells me on this resolution is we're in control over the next 3.5 months as we negotiate a development agreement, which I believe will come before the council for approval, so that you'll have one more shot at this. That development agreement will spell out timeline, when he has to start building, all those kind of things that we normally would do with a developer on property that we have some control over. And if we can't reach an agreement, then we get the property. So it feels like we have pretty good control over what happens. We're not just giving him, an open rein to do anything that he wants at this point. We have control over those negotiations. It'll start with staff, and I have confidence in the staff to be able to negotiate a good preliminary agreement that'll go in front of the Public Works Committee. And then if that passes through there, then it'll go to the council for a vote. So really, there's 2 or 3 checks and balances in the process.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I put a lot of thought into this, was very concerned about it at first, but I've had a lot of the concerns that I had addressed. And so I'm still not sure that we've clarified what those 3 different options look like, and maybe I see it more clearly now to ask. Correct me if I'm wrong, what was the range and average of the parcels that sold in the last sale, all the ones that nothing happened with? people have quoted it.
Yeah, so these are rough numbers because I don't have that spreadsheet
Sure,
in front of me.
that's
But
fine.
so roughly the smallest amount they sold for, one sold for $100 and some dollars, and the most was close to $4,000.
Okay, and so what we have here is 19 properties that a total of $165,000 is due on, right? So that's more money than we got on the last batch. And so if they just go on the plain old tax, it seems like there's 3 buckets of money that we're missing: the taxes, the past due specials, and the future specials. And to clarify where we are on all 3 of those buckets with these 3 options, if it just goes to the tax sale, we have no idea how much they'll sell for, but it's pretty clear that it would be less than is due on the taxes, much less the specials, so we're out some money. This option number, if we go and buy them, still the same amount of money, we're going to be bidding the same or about as whatever somebody else is bidding on them. We're hoping that it will be less, which means we lose even more money if we buy them on the second and the specials are gone. On this third one, if I understand it, we would get 100% of the past due taxes, so $165,000 tomorrow. Plus, there's a negotiation later to recoup some of those past due specials. Is that what I heard you say? Okay, so we're on a better deal on option 3 here, just out of the chute, and we don't have to manage it. So so that takes care of taxes and the past due specials. Then for the future specials, do those stay with those properties? And then how do we optimize what we're going to get in between those 3 options?
Yes, Councilwoman. So future specials, regardless of if it sells on the tax sale or if you do this, continue to run with the land until the specials are done. The concern that Councilman Dobler raised is that the cost of the specials appear to be higher than can be economically feasible to develop and have the person pay on them. So there is some processes that we can work on with bond councils to essentially decrease those specials annually, but then add them back on through the form of a special assessment through a CID on the back years. And so the resolution calls for city staff to work with bond council on all of the lots out there to figure out what is the correct amount that needs to be on those specials on an annual basis to make them economically feasible for whoever buys the house to pay them in addition to their mortgage.
So we would do that in any of those to try and make them more affordable in the future?
That would, of course, be a policy decision for the governing body, but it does seem as if regardless of which option 1, 2, or 3 you go down, you would probably want to have staff continue to work with bond council on figuring out a way to make sure that specials start actually getting paid.
And then to kind of pull that all together, this discussion of an RHID and a CID, which are way down the line with option number 3, is to help get those utilities in and to help cover some of the other expenses of putting this package together and doing them all as a package that should help affordability. I don't want to.
I think that's fair.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to double check because there are layers. With that, I think you've clarified it, but there's been a lot of bad feeling out there as if Mr. Klossman or Clayton Investments was involved from day one as an original investor. And if I understand correctly, what Jennifer went through, that wasn't the case at all, but instead came in later in the game to try and bail it out. Without putting words in your mouth?
No, I wouldn't use the term bail it out, but structure it because for those that may not be aware for the tax sale as well, there's another bank involved. There's a bank who's going through the same tax sale process this week and who owns lots out there. So there's multiple banks in our community affected by, unfortunately, this failed investment from 2008. So Jim being an entrepreneur and someone dedicated to this community, thought, hey, maybe I can try to figure out a successful plan because there was nothing that was happening. And that he didn't step into that role until 2015, when this was actually authorized, I believe. The ordinance that authorized the special assessments was 2006.
Thank you. And Councilman Dobler, you went through some of the list of the properties. I've been very impressed with Wheatfield. I know we stressed a lot about whether to support that, and it's worked out really well. I represent downtown. Some folks are still, Jim stepped in and helped buy those properties. There's been some fussing about the ones that aren't redeveloped yet. It's very comforting to hear that the taxes are paid on all of them, and I did not realize that he had done the Kansan building, the Crosby building, and then a second redo on the Dibble building, and those have all been really successful investments downtown. So having a single developer and having it be Jim who's already committed to this is encouraging to me. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Councilman Duncan?
Make a final comment, then I'm going to shut up, I promise. I get where our legal counsel was talking about, and Councilman Valdivia is concerned about lawsuits on this, treating people. But I will add this on the RHID process. The RHID state law gives us lots of flexibility to determine how we want to determine whether we want to send a project forward to be eligible for the RHID. So to Amanda's point, as long as we make it clear as to what our reasoning was each specific case, the state's still going to review that. If they have issues with that, they'll come talk to us, and if they don't, they give us a lot of leeway to make those decisions. It's not baked into the RHAD law. Councilman Ortiz, I will remind you that this has to come back to you because you are the chair of the Public Infrastructure Committee. So, but that was my point. My point is you will be the first person who gets to take a hard look at this and look at staff and everyone else and say, no, let's do better or let's make it different. And so I think it's actually good sometimes to have the skeptic be in that role. And so I just want to remind you that you will be the first one to have a crack at whatever we come back. Looking at the numbers real quick, because that's what I like to do, I'll just remind everybody, if we pass this, $165,000 gets paid tomorrow. Some of the numbers that have been talked about, we're talking about this $900,000 number, so that you can take that off that. We're also talking about these aren't going to be forgiven. They're going to be restructured. I think that's a very important distinction. There will still be a deal made to pay for each individual lot some amount. And some of the amounts we've talked about, if you start adding that up, we're looking at a payback of that $900,000 of over $500,000. And of that $900,000, I believe $100,000 or more is just penalties and fees, not the actual assessments and taxes. So this gives us the option of actually recouping a majority of that $900,000, which right now we are in no position to do. And so I think that should not get lost in this conversation and is important that this is not a forgiveness at all. It is just a way to restructure this thing to bring those dollars back to the taxpayers and get this development moving forward on those 19 properties. And again, if it falls through, great. We're going to get those properties and not have to pay a nickel for them if we can make this work. Last thing I'm going to say is this. I'm elected to represent the people, not a person. And I think sometimes what's really hard, and for all of it, but I can only speak for me, and it is hard, and Jim and Jennifer have heard me say this before, there's a couple properties I wish that would be developed a little quicker that he owns, and there's a lot of really great things that he's done in this community. He deserves all the credit for that. But I will neither hold one of my concerns against him, nor will I use the other to give him a pass as we work through this. It's my job to look at this individual situation and say what is best for the people that I represent and getting us a path forward, irrespective of the goods and bads of the person. Sometimes there's exceptions to that, absolutely, in the broad scope. But that's how I've looked at this as we've moved forward. And if I didn't believe this would actually benefit not just the citizens who live near my district, but also if we can reach a deal, all the citizens of Topeka, I wouldn't be here supporting it because I'm elected by those folks to look out for their interests. And so those are all the reasons I'm supportive of this and have tried to work on this. And so thank you, Mayor. And I really am going to be quiet now, I promise.
Okay. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to call my attorney and see what he says.
There's a couple of things here. We do have a gentleman signed up for public comment. This evening, people can't make up their mind whether they want to talk before or after to make a decision. But I will hold my comments until the public has their opportunity to speak. So, Mr. McClure?
Make the deal today. Take the money. If you don't take the money today, I mean, why are we here? We got to take the money. But that's part of our job. Part of our job, well, your job, I'm just counting on the election. I want the opportunity to collect all the back debt. One of your councilmen that sponsored this is wrong about the county attorney's letter. You know, what made me angry is when he yelled at me in the hallway, because it's not the county attorney's responsibility to decide the market. And what worries me about the land bank and the value, it's, listen to Neil's comment about the value of our community compared to the other towns in this market. Until we start broadening the tax base and growing the population, we're not going to add value to the community. We won't. But you got to make the deal today, no matter what. You got to absolve him of all his sins today, because he's willing to write a check for, what, $167,000? Take that money today, and then let's just see how the whole thing shakes out. We'll keep an eye on him. He's got a good track record. I live in a glass house. Here's the difference. You guys are learning as you go on a salary. We learn as we go in the hope of a salary. Being a developer out here, it's impossible in this town. And if you got a guy willing to write a check for $167,000, take that money. Thanks.
Okay. I want to speak in support of this issue. Mr. McClure hit on something that I agree with. Yeah. It's about time, huh? And that is, it's been said, I don't know for how many decades, that it's hard to work with developers in Topeka. Whether that's true or not, it probably all depends on who the developer is and what's being considered at the time. But tonight I heard some things that were not about so much opportunity, but more about personal character. And I don't think that we've given enough weight to that character. And I think that it's important that we do that to every developer, including Mr. McClure. So you can't make decisions on one or two bad opinions that you might have of an individual. We all make good decisions. We all make questionable decisions. I think it's very clear to us here that this governing body, the majority believes it's important for us to work with developers who are meeting us at some point where we can find some resolution to a problem. To just ignore the problem and let it continue and hope that the next governing body will attack it is not good planning for our city. We have to have the rooftops in our city, and we have property within our city limits that are sitting there ready to be developed, but for one reason or other, it gets sidelined because of issues that really don't have anything to do with the advantage that this community will get by being able to make that property available for development. So I speak in behalf of this resolution. Again, I want to echo the comments earlier, thanking the city attorney for working so closely with our governing body and with our developer and his staff to bring us to a point where we have the discussion. If you want to go back historically and ask how many times we have got to this point, I can't remember that we've ever got this far. So we've actually gotten further than any other governing body has. So that's something to be proud of for both sides. So I commend the entire governing body for having the discussion, and we do have a motion and a second on the floor. If there's no further discussion, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
All right, council members Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
No.
Ortiz, and Kell.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes with Councilmember Valdivia Acala voting no. The motion carries.
Okay. Again, thank you for the discussion. We'll move on now to action item 4G. And again, we have somebody signed up for this particular issue, but we'll wait until we hear from the city manager.
G is a resolution introduced by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez approving the issuance by the City of Wichita, Kansas of its health care facilities revenue bonds for the purpose of financing or refinancing the acquisition, construction, improvement, and equipping of senior living and health care facilities located in the City of Topeka, Kansas.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Ben Hart, our interim chief financial officer, will take us through this item.
Ben?
Good to see you guys tonight. So what you've got in front of you, the state statutes allow municipalities to issue industrial revenue bonds. Those industrial revenue bonds can be issued for projects within the city, but also outside of the city. But they also have to notice those municipalities that are not part of their own entity. It must be given a notice of that of the municipality that these bonds are being issued. What you've got in front of you is the City of Wichita is proposing to issue bonds to benefit facilities, healthcare facilities, in various Wichita and non-Wichita locations across the state. Your options are obviously to approve this document, the resolution, or disapprove or take no action at all. Now, just for clarification, the health facility revenue bonds are not debt of the city. They're not debt of City of Wichita either. The city has a facility at 7412, I believe, Southwest 6th Street, Topeka Presbyterian Manor. The Presbyterian Manor is the recipient of these funds. The funds are going to go toward refunding or refinancing what they've already issued, the City of Wichita's already issued for them, and general improvements to their facilities themselves. Our facility within Topeka is one of those recipients. So state statute actually require the City of Wichita to give notice to the other cities that this bond issue is taking place. What they're asking is for an approval of a resolution supporting this issue for Wichita.
Okay. Any questions for Ben? Councilman Dobler?
Well, maybe it is a question. Since we're authorizing the City of Wichita to issue revenue bonds, could we authorize them to write us a check for
I knew that
maybe 1.4 million? Seems like we could slide that in there someplace. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
And this is really an open question too. I think we usually do revenue bonds for Brewster Place, I want to say. So why would Wichita want to be funding something here?
In this case, it was just for, when it's multiple cities, multiple locations, the entity can choose whoever they want to go through for that industrial revenue bond, which is what this is. In this case, just to streamline the process and streamline the bond issue, all the facilities, instead of having one at a time come, they just did the whole thing at one time. So they have facilities throughout the state. So the entity itself, Presbyterian Manor Inc., decided big Wichita presence, then they're just going to have Wichita issue the bonds. And the state allows that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Further questions? Motion to approve by Councilwoman Ortiz, second by Councilman McKell. If you call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz, Kell,
Yes.
and Miller.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, we still do have somebody who
Mayor.
wants this.
Should be signed up under the budget ordinance. That's a typo on my part. Yep.
Pardon?
She wants to speak to the budget ordinance, the next item. That's a typo on the sheet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she wants to speak to the
All right.
budget ordinance.
Well, we still give us about 15 minutes to get this next one.
What?
At the H one? Okay. Let's, so that you have the opportunity to speak, Danielle, do you want to speak to 4H? Is that what you're telling me?
The budget ordinance.
Yeah. Okay.
We are on the industrial revenue bonds. There was a typo. She actually would like to speak on the next item, so I do not believe you have anyone subject to public comment. So now would be an appropriate time for a motion if you would like to pass
Okay.
this.
On G.
Correct.
All right.
We
Is
are
there a
on
motion?
industrial revenue bonds.
Sylvia did, and I seconded.
Did you?
Oh, did
just
we?
did it.
Or we didn't. I've had a very long day. I'm sorry.
Say, you got me going, yeah. Okay. We'll go to 5H.
And that's where Sylvia's calling for a timeout.
Madam Clerk, I think it's been suggested that since this item is going to be a lengthy one for discussion, that we take a quick 10-minute break or recess before we address action item H.
Dodgeball outside. No. You said recess.
Okay.
I'm with
We-
you.
Okay, we're coming back from our recess, and we'll proceed with the agenda. Item H, Madam Clerk.
H is an appropriation ordinance introduced by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez, approving and adopting the operating budget for the City of Topeka for the year 2025 and appropriating the amounts for the purposes set forth therein.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you. Mayor and members of the governing body, Josh McInerney, our budget manager, will lead us through this item. As we continue the discussions on our FY 2025 proposed budget, I want to say first off, thank you to the staff for their extraordinary work on this budget process, and to this governing body for its questions, guidance, and input into this process. Over the last several weeks, we have made presentations, departmental overviews, and overview of the budget as a whole. We have definitely listened to some of the, or not some, but all of the public input. As we start this evening's discussion, I would like to take this opportunity to share some of my thoughts as far as amendments that we want to put forward in the budget for 2025. And then if you would allow, Mayor, for us to lead off with that, and then the governing body take it from there.
I am going to give an opportunity for the citizen who signed up for the budget process in this issue so that they can make their comments before we get into what I'm sure will be quite a bit of discussion.
Thank you, sir.
So I have signed up Miss Danielle Twemlow. If you'll please come up, Danielle.
Danielle Twemlow, community member and advocate. In all transparency, I am working really hard on this comment to stay focused on what I originally came to speak about tonight on this budget topic. Luckily, I signed myself up for public comment, so you don't worry, you'll hear about it later. So currently, I want to kind of bring focus as we have this discussion for us. Some terms I hear quite a bit when we're talking about budget and cost, mainly about charging taxpayers that we need to add this tax because we can't keep kicking the can and we can't keep putting things off. And I think that's exactly right? We hear that. We've heard it 2012, 2023, during ARPA, all to go to the utilities. We had to keep getting taxed on our utilities higher and higher for that. And we can really think about the fact that we need to stop kicking the can down the road and investing in reactive measures in our community. So we know that just last year alone, that the economic cost of gun violence within our community cost Topeka, Kansas, $417,899,956. To taxpayers, over $19.5 million. That is an economic cost calculator that breaks down the cost to us when firearm violence is used for mental health services, for emergency transportation, medical care, health care, our police response, the criminal justice system, employers' time lost not only for families that are experiencing the loss of someone or the violence that has impacted them, but also perpetrators and their families. And then really how we are seeing that long term. How does that impact our government? So we know that we can't waste any more time. We can't afford to not start investing in preventative measures. And really, we know through CDC and through the Department of Justice and all these other entities around the country who have been initiating efforts that are really making an impact in their community, that this means we look at things with a public health approach, that we begin investing more and not just doubling our social service funds, but really investing in people. Because I will have to push back a little bit and say that, increasing the value of our community isn't just going to be with the housing market and building growth, it's investing in our people. And I actually just spent all day at the Greater Topeka Partnerships Inclusion Summit, and the speaker, Eric Ellis, said, people are not being prioritized in businesses, and we function much like a business here, and that is why it fails. And we have to keep looking at people as part of our infrastructure and investing in the things that are going to help us thrive. It's going to help reduce the call log for our police department. We've heard several times how their call log is high on mental health calls, or in one of the training sessions that we went to, we heard that they had to get someone to come in and talk about landlord-tenant rights because of the number of calls they get addressing landlord-tenant rights. That's not their job. They shouldn't have to be responding to all these different issues that aren't within their purview. And we can relieve some of that by looking at ways to invest in social service agencies and programs that are going to help reduce the cost of violence. So I hope we look at that as we move forward within this budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. As mentioned at the opening of this item, we have listened to the community, understanding some of the challenges that our residents are facing with regards to taxes. And we took that as a challenge to look at ways to make some cuts, recommended cuts that we would like to implement, but definitely want to get the governing body's input on. These cuts would essentially total the reduction of 1 mil, getting us back to a zero change in our mill rate. And so earlier this afternoon, we sent some information to the governing body. I believe we have copies of that. I would ask that Josh maybe take a few minutes to run us through this, and then we'll open the floor for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Josh?
So high level, like City Manager said, the first and the major amendment to this budget would be, we initially proposed a budget of 37.952 as a total mill levy rate. Amending this budget under the email that was sent out today would bring that mill levy rate down to what the 2024 mill levy rate is, which is 36.952. Now, reducing expenses, since we're lowering the mill levy, we're making up that revenue by cutting current vacant positions that were, most of which were not included in the vacancy credit, and we're going to unfund some positions for 2025. Most notably, some engineering positions, which we asked for $600,000 more in consultant fees, to where we were kind of double dipping in the fact that we were asking for positions and consultant fees. If we happen to fill those positions, those consultant fees would inherently go down. So that was the major change, and then just unfunding some of those other small positions and doing some transfers to take some heat off the general fund. Now, to get revenue on the backside, typically the state's best practice is to assume a 95% property tax collection rate. Our last couple of years, we've been around at 96% collection rate, because obviously not everyone pays their property taxes in some cases. We upped that collection percentage from the mill levy to 95.5%. That's penciling in about $200,000 of additional revenue that we were going to actually have an actualized, but this actually formalizes that in the budget. And then finally, even though we are keeping the mill at a current rate of 36.952, as we talked about on July 30th, our mill levy goes in 3 spots. It goes into our general fund operations, our debt service fund, which pays our bond and interest payments, and our special liability. And we're going to propose shifting one of those debt service mills into the general fund by one, which will allow us to have an additional $1.4 million of revenue. And the reason we think we can do that is because over the last couple of years, we haven't really had to bond as much, because we've used a lot of ARPA money to defer bonding, and then used a lot of cash funding to pay off projects. So with property taxes also appreciating at a higher rate, that fund's built up a fund balance of about 13 or 14 million at the end of 23, where we are comfortable shifting that for the future, just for this year, and we can look at it in the future, because you can examine it on a year-by-year basis, to where we can fund some operations with that mill levy. But overall, the mill levy is staying flat compared to last year. And then finally, this is still kind of up in the air with union. We had to make a union adjustment based off further talks that have stalled that we're still kind of trying to rectify. So we had to add some expenses back in on that end. But overall, these are proposed line item changes to where most of it's in expenditures, but with the shift of the mill, we're gaining a little revenue as well, and then sharpening our pencils that way. So that's just kind of a high-level overview. And we sent this out late, so we understand there might be questions.
And on top of that, I just want to reiterate that the positions that we have identified are vacant positions. Nobody will be losing their jobs, if you will. And these positions have also sat vacant for a number of months. So I do not anticipate much of a service impact with these reductions as well, or unfunding these positions. We have discussed these with the department heads who would be affected, and again, just wanted to add that extra background on this, and we will stand for any questions you may have.
Questions for City Manager? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. So on the temporary unfunded vacant positions, we're going to keep the position but unfund it. Is that what we're doing?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. Ombudsman funding, transfer the funding for that. I don't understand that.
So currently our ombudsman does a lot of customer service related work. A lot of our customer service calls come in through the water fund, through the call center. And so we believe that there's a nexus between some of the work that they are doing. And so we would like to move that position into the water fund and find a way to gain an efficiency by putting the ombudsman and working with the ombudsman in the customer service team within water, because a lot of them do the see-click fix programs. And so we do believe that there is a nexus. I believe there's a nexus between the jobs that those teams do, and want to see if we can gain an efficiency through that.
I mean, because he was kind of separated for the whole city, so he would still work for the whole city, just move to that department, is that what you're saying?
So he would move, that position would be moved into the fund, And keep in mind that the call center also transfers and does customer service for other city departments as well. They've kind of served as a central call location or a call center for the entire city. So again, I believe that there's a nexus between what the ombudsman does as well as the call center.
Just as long as you're not taking his position.
We're not taking his position, ma'am, no.
Okay. Let's talk about the fire union adjustment. I don't understand why we're not going to do the 4% across like we had talked about.
So we are planning to discuss some of those details in executive session later today, but that is what we're planning for, and that is the increment that you see in front of you. And so we just want to make sure with the most up-to-date information that we have that in our financial models.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Further questions? Councilman Duncan.
I guess there's two ways to read this, which means one of the ways I'm reading it wrong. So help me here. So we're still working off the 1 mil equals 1.4, give or take, right? A couple dollars one way or the other. So the total, after you go through all of these positions, after you go through the moving of the mill rate over, I'm a little confused. It has the total change is 2.4 million. And then you say leave the rate at 1.4, which gives us the net budget of basically little over $1 million. So is that the base total that we're talking about with these changes of savings, or are we talking about 2.4 million?
So the 2.4 million is on an income statement level. So I'll just read the numbers. So total net cuts from the general fund, that $843,000 is a reduction on the expense side, and then that increase on the revenue of the 1.6, that's an increase on the revenue side. So that $2.4 million would be, if we ended the year, that would be $2.4 million of cash that we would inherently have. Does that make sense? And then the reason that 2.4 goes down to the 1 million is because we have to adjust for the lowering of the mill levy.
Gotcha.
So we're in a sense, we're flipping our income statement to a positive for $1 million.
Right. Okay. Okay. And that helps me, because then I guess my question is, if that's the case, that we came out with $1 million, why do we feel the need to flip a whole mill from the debt service fund as opposed to just basically keep it even, so that as little as we can, as much as we can keep in that fund, we can keep in that fund?
So two things. The reason is we had a really high vacancy credit of $3 million. That allows us to lower the vacancy credit to reduce our reliance on that. Now, the good thing about shifting the debt service mill back into the general fund is you can transfer general fund money into the debt service mill, but you can't do it the vice versa. So if for whatever reason, hey, we have a lot more money through this 1 mil transfer, we can transfer back to the debt service fund at the end of the year. And that's a council policy decision.
Okay.
But if we left 1 mil just in the debt service fund, we can't do it the other way.
Okay.
That was the rationale. I'm not saying that's right or wrong.
Okay.
That was it's ultimately a
that's
policy
helpful,
decision.
because that great. Thank you.
Further questions? Councilwoman Hiller.
I'll ask one. You all know I've been troubled about this whole thing, so I've got my notes. But on the debt service fund, part of what you're proposing we do is start borrowing money for things that we had planned to do cash with. And so what is your projection maybe next year and then the next couple? I had no idea that we'd put the Poe Quincy money in the utilities instead of in the general fund. That was huge. So we were expecting some pretty big hits on additional borrowing, costing more in debt service. Where are we?
So we are at the end of our minimum fund balance policy is like 10%, and we're currently at above 70%. I think we're around 75% at the end of 2023. And the good thing about the debt service fund is those are projects on paper. Council can always choose to delay projects or not take on new projects to where it's nothing's really locked in the debt service fund except for ongoing projects. So
right.
And this can be changed again next year, but we're comfortable for a 1 year that we have plenty of fund balance to cover it. Because like I said earlier, we haven't bonded a lot because we've been cash funding and we've been
Right.
using ARPA money to where 1 year, we could probably do this for the next 5 years, honestly, but we think we need to examine each year, and doing this year's will be fine.
Well, that's one reason I asked, because we had been working hard to reduce our borrowing so that we did have cash for operating. And so if we've got that extra money, then switching it over makes a lot of sense to me, but not as a temporary one-year thing, but instead to just cover some of our items that are really maintenance or annual expenses. You didn't go that far, obviously, but you're looking at this as just a one-year deal?
It's up to council discretion each year. So when we set the mill levy, it's distributed into 3 different funds, and we can keep it, because right now it's at 10.717. And then we're proposing for this year lowering it to 9.717. So we can have it there for this year. And then if we think, hey, we want to bond or take on a new project that needs to be debt funded, we can increase that mill levy. But if we're comfortable with keeping that next year, that's under the council's purview to do.
I guess where I was going with that was the kind of the flip of that thought. People
you
being oriented toward borrowing more money because we have money in the debt service fund instead of just getting it out of there and spending. I mean, I handed out, and we didn't talk about it last week after all the conversations, but the amortization schedules, because if it costs us a net of $800,000 to borrow $2.3 million, if we don't have to spend that at all, it works for me. It really adds up, and when we're borrowing for things that don't need to be, because I think your proposal still here then has you converting a couple of things to borrowing instead of to cash.
Yeah, so as the budget, and we kind of talked about this morning at the policy, or the Public Works Infrastructure Committee, is that we proposed bonding firm for 2025, and then converting a past bonded project, which was Dreams, from cash to bonds. Now, being sensitive of converting that, we also converted 2 previously bonded projects to federal funds exchange money to offset the Dreams conversion. So we try to be very cognizant of how much we're bonding.
I'll save other comments till.
Councilman Dobler?
Yeah, so you just answered part of my question. Firm is really the major fund that we move from cash to bonding, right?
Correct, yep.
A year ago, we didn't expect to end up with $15 million over and above our 20% reserves, and that's what we started out with this year, I think, in the unassigned reserve fund. Obviously, that all gets played into the budget this year, but it strikes me that if we, March, April of next year, when we're closing the books, we have excess money back in that unassigned reserve fund, or we don't use all of it, that the logical place to spend that cash would be back on Firm and Dreams and some of those programs. So I think we just need to keep that in mind as we get into next year, that that excess cash, we need to keep the same mindset of bonding as little as we possibly can. But right now, it makes sense to cover the budget. So.
Oh, and Councilman Dobler is correct. So just because we approve a project as being cash or bonded today, that does not prevent us from switching it later down the line. So for example, we don't sell bonds until August. So Councilman Dobler's right. We can get to see where we're at in March and May, and we can eventually convert back and transfer that money to be partially cash fund, et cetera. And it's a fluid situation is what I'm trying to say, so.
Further questions from the governing body? Is there a motion to adopt?
Oh, I didn't know if you were asking just for questions on their proposal. So
Okay.
I have an overall
Okay.
proposal, so here's a couple of these. Can you help? Thank you. One for Sylvia, and then go scoot all the way around. The mayor's got one.
Councilwoman Heller, does Deputy Mayor have a copy of?
Yes, I sent it to her.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anybody else there's nobody else online, right?
I don't think anybody else is on there.
Do you want me to wait for Spencer?
Why don't you go ahead and proceed?
Okay, thank you. I've made some general statements in our earlier meetings, but I have been very concerned about the amount of difference between revenue and expense in the budget that was proposed to us. And I've worked on that on the front page. This is just a 3-page document. The front page is a little background, and then the others are some places we could cut or adjust. You can see on that front page, the concern I've got is that when this budget was proposed, the staff said, we know we've got a $15 million shortfall of expenses over revenue. That's been modified to $14 million at this point, but when you start looking at where that money is, there have been these temporary tuckaways of moving this over to this spot for a little bit and this over to that spot for a little bit. I was concerned about how that would add up, and then what we needed to do this year so that we didn't have twice that much of a challenge in a year. So that's why I put my time into it. What you see on the front page with the itemized list to get to that 20.65 million shortfall, I have reviewed with Josh, who has agreed that that's accurate, and the city manager has reluctantly agreed, if I can say that it's accurate. I used the 14 million shortfall figure. Over the course of just this budget, about $750,000 or 750,000 in full-time equivalents were migrated into side funds out of just general fund. We do have that 3.1 million vacancy factor, which Josh just disclosed to us right away. We've got that 2.3 million in firm money that's being migrated from cash to bonds when we thought we had it in cash, and then $500,000 that really doesn't show in the book, but got borrowed from the engineering fund. Theoretically, we don't ever want to be in a situation where we don't have enough revenue to cover our expenses, and so that got me to looking. I was concerned about being too detailed about suggestions in cuts because I know that city manager is new. He was very eager to have a retreat with us and do a deep dive into all the aspects of our city budget. And we haven't had time to do that yet. Yet, I kind of paired that with my concern about this huge shortfall and said, well, maybe we can identify some areas, and you'll see them in the list. But if we don't make itemized, just for instance, personnel cuts or certain department for some operating cuts, if we challenged ourselves to all of us be diligent with the retreat this fall and to have the specifics of what cuts are in personnel or programs or otherwise would occur before December 20th, so before the year starts, we could be in good shape. In order to be ready for the 26 budget and have it not be as bad, we really need to have our whole budget situation figured out so we've balanced revenue and expenses. Not through the course of next year, but by next May, so that its staff is ready to present us a balanced budget next year. So, first thing on page 2, let me back up just a second. If you look at the various reports that staff has given us, we have increased different departments by $500,000 to $1 million over the last 3 years or so. We need to examine that, see what happened, what we were doing, how essential things are. There are a lot of things to look at. In terms of the unassigned reserve fund, right now that fund has $11.8 million in it. The staff was suggesting that that would grow to 15 by the end of the year and that we should spend it all to subsidize this year's budget. My suggestion would be that we work on some cuts right now so that we don't spend more than 10 million of that fund to subsidize next year's budget. Leave something left in it as we are going through the steps that we need to do. In terms of position cuts, I had a detailed list at one point, but when Amanda said we didn't have to absolutely name each position, I grouped them together to give the city manager and us together the flex to have those conversations before perhaps those final decisions were made. But there has been an itemized list that has more than 8 high-ranking, meaning over $100,000 a year, positions that could be cut or held to fill only at a time when our revenue exceeds our expenses. Stop the growing. That's $1.28 million to look at those 8 positions. 7 frontline positions, meaning not that top element, but people who are making somewhere between 35 and that 100,000. Once again, cut or held to fill at a time when we have excess revenue over expenses. Again, there are details that can fill. So that brings up to almost 2 million in cuts, or again, to hold. There are also 3 executive level positions that have been proposed for adding to our budget. I just don't think we can do it at this time, being 2 additional assistant city managers, being outspoken on those. Just don't think we can do it. And a third as well, that's 700,000. It's a total of already almost $2.5 million. There's been some discussion that, and I don't like limiting a pay freeze to just the non-union employees in the general fund. There's been an offer to do 2% cost of living and up to 3% merit for those individuals. If we just did a 2% freeze on the entire staff, it would be $1.6 million in savings. Specifically to general fund and non-union, it would be $420,000 just in 2025 that we would be able to save. Overtime reductions. When you look at the overtime that's budgeted, when you can see the departmental budgets, we didn't get them this year, but if you've asked for them, you've been able to see it. To take maybe $200,000 from one and $300,000 from another department, that's a management issue. Obviously, if you've got a department that's fully funded, they shouldn't need as much overtime as one that's not. It's understandable. But also managing how people are deployed, how many are deployed, and so on. That should be manageable. Moving down into non-personnel items, I personally had concerns about the property tax rebate program. I appreciate the thought behind it. It is super labor intensive. It's been hard to get rid of it. We learned in the course of it that even you have to break it up because people pay their taxes twice a year, and so there's the admin to give people part at one point and then another half later. We are spending over $1 million in emergency aid, housing, and affordable housing and homelessness are real high priorities for us. We run out of money before the end of the year for rent assistance, for either directly through our staff or through our nonprofits, and for utility assistance and so on. Looking at making sure we're fully covering those crises for our families so they don't become homeless and support the housing that they have, I would suggest is our top priority. I know that people are working again on our camping ordinance. If it's done right, we shouldn't have the huge camps that we would need to spend $40,000 or $50,000 a pop to abate. So challenging ourselves to cut $500,000 that probably wasn't even budgeted for this year, but we spent it to reduce the expense on homeless camp abatements is in the list. Cutting some vehicle expenses when that's cross-departmental, that's not too bad on any particular department. Training as well, that's another $500,000 of cuts. And then with the EMS advancement in the fire department, we've gone back and forth. We don't have our study back yet. Holding that off at least until we have a plan made sense. That was $200,000. That's a total of $4.9 million. Though I don't like to do it, I was a little concerned that us cutting our mill levy by 2 mills last year was premature. We already knew that the economy was flattening and so on. And sure enough, here we are. It's an option, of course, but rather than go back another mill, adding back the second mill that we cut last year to be back at the 2023 level to help get ourselves a little bit closer to break even. Seemed like we needed to do it. I think we haven't talked about it much, but in the council, but the suggestions for how to make up that $20 million deficit that were in the book were both big sales tax related. I think the general consensus is that's not viable and not likely to happen. So we really have to figure out how to come up with $20 million some other way, or to make that many cuts. And so I felt like we should look at putting that other mill back into our, which was up to the limit that we voted for. We already talked about debt financing. One of the things we can do is move the Dreams money that was supposed to be bonded in 2025 to half-cent sales tax. That's the Dreams One program from Historic Holiday Park, and absolutely everything they did with that $4 million was half-cent sales tax eligible. So that would be not new money, but money we already have that has accumulated a little bit of a balance, and we need to spend down. With all those adjustments and actually cutting some positions, I was comfortable at putting the vacancy credit back in at 2.1 million instead of 3.1. That list then addressed 18.4 million of that $20 million shortfall. 10 of it being out of that fund, but 10 of it being renewable sources that would help our threshold for next year. Couple other things that are down there at the bottom of that page. Again, back to the Dreams money, 900,000 of the money that was spent in Valley Park is eligible for half-cent sales tax as well. So whereas it was budgeted to be cash, the city manager's proposing to bond it, we could probably convert 900,000 of that to half-cent sales tax and just have it go away and reserve the cash. One of the things that's come up, and I was a little dismayed to see cutting an engineering position in the city manager's proposal, but if we can do that, we have vacant engineering positions and we know that, and it's hurting, and we know that we're spending literally millions of dollars in contracted work because we don't have our own staff. I know Braxton's worried about cutting that money out of the budget, the extra 600,000 he asked for, and the savings of at least $1 million a year that we can have if we hire the 4 engineers. So my proposal, I did not put reducing the budget by 1.6 million, but instead, if we can do a full court press and hire the 4 engineers that we need in the Public Works Department by the end of the year. And Councilman Dobler had some pretty good ideas about how to search and who to recruit to. That could save us 1.6 million out of the budget this year. So, sort of where I was coming from. Again, if we did all of this with inflation on the budget, we still likely to be facing over 10 to 16 million new dollars that we need to figure out where to get in 2026. And so at least knocking out 10 million of this now so that it's not so overwhelming we can't do it was really important to me. So open for questions. Really appreciate all the folks that provided information to research from.
Okay. Councilman Kell?
On the additional personnel, about halfway down page 2, I just want a little more information on the 2% deferral of budgeted pay, for instance.
Yes.
What are you?
The suggestion that had come was that it can be hard to do a whole across the board 2%, just hold off and just say we don't have the money, we don't have revenue to cover our expenses, we can't do the raises we would like to do. That gets complicated with union contracts. What I did finally, which had come across, was to take just the non-union general fund staff, and finance advised that 2% either deferred or not ever paid on that group would generate $420,000. Deferred meaning if there was a way to organize people to say, if we can save this money, you can have it mid-year or at the end of the year, but until we can balance the budget, we don't have it.
I don't like that, we've pretty much worked with every single union this last year, taking care of all of them, and then we're telling that all the non-union employees, sorry, we're not going to take care of you.
I agree.
And that's my one big thing is we've worked really hard to be competitive in this market for employees, and then it's
I agree, and I will tell you that this is in here because I was on the council in 2010 when we laid off over 100 employees and we didn't have any money, and we took our reserve down to $4 million to try and with no raises, cuts. We've never recovered our engineers because we cut those engineers back in 2010 and we never got it back. And we knew that just using an example, Councilwoman Ortiz is nodding, as an example, we knew when that happened that if we couldn't hire them back right away, we had to get our projects done because top priority was to get our infrastructure, work on our streets and potholes and so on, that we would have to contract and that it would cost us more than having our own staff. And we never got back over that hump. It's been almost 15 years. And I just hate to see that happen. I've seen what happened when we really didn't have any money.
Yeah, I've also seen when people don't feel appreciated, they leave their job.
I agree.
And then in that situation, we could be spending more money on temporary help to have temps come in that we have to train almost every single time one of them come in, and we fall further behind. That's the big. And everything else, I believe is workable, but that to tell the non-union employees,
I agree.
And it also can create strife in the workplace when there are union and non-union working together, that the non-union can feel like they're not appreciated like their coworker is. And I've been there before where everyone in the office has gotten a raise. And I'm one of 3 people in the whole entire office that didn't get a raise because of the way the state structured the pay raises that year. And all of a sudden you're looking, wait, I'm one of the most productive people, but one of the lowest paid people.
Right.
So it's one of those things of, I think, like I said, we've worked really hard at taking care of, to be competitive. And then now to sit there and say to the non-union employees, we're not going to even, you're kind of on the bottom of the totem pole, so.
I agree with you, but I put it in there because I've seen it happen. I think that's why we have 7 unions, because the city did it for years. But that's the kind of thing that we have to, if we don't fix this budget so that we have enough to pay to keep all those employees for the next 2 years, we're going to be in big trouble. And I just wanted to lay out because those are some of the, I don't mind taking that one off the list, but that's less that we're shoring up our base as well. And I felt like it would probably provoke this conversation and that was important to do.
Like I said, all the rest of it, I believe is very workable, but that's my one sticking point right there.
Okay. My thought was when we get back to this, we could take it maybe, unless somebody wanted to vote to pass the whole package, we could take it a section at a time and see what people wanted to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just say on the pay raise point, one of the questions I had asked staff was, and it's built in a little differently, but it's about 5% is what's in this current budget. And city manager wasn't here the last couple of years where we did a wage study, and it's not perfect. We know we have some positions that definitely still need some work, but we did elevate, which was one reason for our bump in the last 2 years when we didn't have some union contracts, was because we did try to bring some more salaries in line, especially on the lower level. So one of the questions I did ask, inflation right now is a little under 3%, and I did say, well, I want to give people that inflationary raise, maybe about 3%, to keep them pace with inflation, make sure their salaries are still there. But what the savings would be if we just made it 3% generally instead of 5%, and that was give or take $600,000. So I mean, I also did have that conversation, trying to find the balance between making sure we're staying competitive, keeping ahead of inflation, but also I want to make sure, based on the projections we saw for next year of job cuts we would have to make, I was like, I'd rather they keep their job and have a job rather than us talking about cutting those jobs. So just for what it's worth, I did have some of those conversations with staff too.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you. I totally agree. I think I came in at 2.5%, but I could live with 3%. So I'll ask you, Brett, how many years did you work for the state, and how many years did we not get a raise? For a long time.
Yes, but I'm saying that there's that example of I went from the prison to DCF, and I got a raise at the prison, and then came to DCF.
We didn't get a raise.
No, everyone in that building got a raise, and there's only like 12 people. It was a CD article. There's like 12 people around the state that didn't get a raise. I was like one of those 12 people.
No,
I'm just saying.
There was a lot of people that didn't get a raise, but at least they had a job. That's.
Yeah, and I get that, but there's always the steps. There's stuff like that.
We didn't even get a step. We didn't get a raise. We didn't get a step. We didn't get anything, and they said it was unlawful for years. Anyway, Karen, this is really good. I can't agree with the property tax rebate program. I just can't agree with that. I think that was put in there with good faith from Spencer to help our low to moderate income elderly, and I think it's doing just that, and I think I'd like to see that program kind of tweaked. I'd also like to know from staff, let me hold up. Vehicles across departments, are you saying just don't do anything? Or are you saying leasing them? What are you saying?
It's not specific. If you look at department by department, they may have a couple $100,000, somebody may have $50,000. I don't have all the specifics of what vehicle. I think that's purchase money for the most part, and so I don't know specifically what they.
If I could. So one of the things that we did specifically to address this, and apologies, I did use some of your notes here to craft what we developed earlier. One of the purchases was for new animal services trucks. I think it was $300,000 or so. $260. So what we did was, instead of adding that capital money into the budget, we worked with Interim Chief Haltom to hold some of those police officer and training positions, so that way we could redirect that funding to the vehicle purchase. So that way we're not adding to the budget, we're simply holding the positions vacant to make the purchase, use that funding one time to make the purchase that's needed for animal services. And so essentially what we're doing is just redirecting the savings from holding those positions vacant. I did guarantee, for anybody who may be listening, I did guarantee that if we are successful and filling all of our police officer positions, I will ensure that we have the funding available to make sure that we fill those positions. But those are some of the things that we did with some of these adjustments to reduce a $300,000 add to the FY 2025 budget.
Okay. If I may, Mr. Mayor?
Please.
The reduction of the homeless camp abatements. I mean, right now, we are doing a lot of those abatements. How will this affect us? How much do we have allotted for it, and how much does this,
and I don't want to speak for Councilman Heller, under this, we just wouldn't do the homeless abatements, and so we wouldn't actualize those expenses.
And so the other night...
Hold on. So you're saying we wouldn't do any abatements at all?
That's how I took this proposal amendment, yeah.
So one of the things that we did, we discussed the other night in an IA meeting, I think the number was about $780,000 that we spent on homeless encampment cleanup this year. And so, taking that, I mean, we'd basically do $300,000 less.
If I can explain that one, Mayor.
Councilwoman.
When we did the camping ordinance back in 2019, that didn't get fully passed, but I was on the committee, we were both on the committee to do that. Part of the, which I was hoping maybe was being discussed again, one of the things that we'd written into that was that people who were camping out would need to follow all the ordinances that we have with the city as well, and that rather than having a permitting process per se for camping, like up front, like you would have at a campground, we would have part of what our ordinance would say is if you're camping out, you can have up to 3 nights. Other than that, to stay any longer, you have to be following all of our ordinances, demonstrating that you're following all of our ordinances, which includes not having illegal stuff inside your structure, not letting your dog run loose, not having trash, so that if any time a campground was observed being a cluttered mess or not following the codes and so on, that would be approached right away before the camps grew to be that out of control and to need that expensive labor and equipment cleanup that we've been doing now. So simply to move people on before it ever got out of hand.
Yeah, and I found that. I'll email that to everybody, believe it or not, going through some of my stuff.
Good.
If I could, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I believe the NIAs are the backbone, but I believe if they were to have a heavy camp in their area and we told them that there was no money, that would be a problem. That would be a problem. So I can appreciate where you're going with that. I don't know if I can support that 500.
I just don't want to spend in that kind of money.
I don't want to spend that either. But if you look at the riverbanks and you look at some areas that I've been through and take a ride with the chief, go down under and look at some of those areas. I just don't see how we get across that. People say they don't want to spend, but when it's in their backyard, it's a different story.
Right.
I think that's all I have. Oh, one other question, Mayor.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
not on Karen's amendment. You know, it was in the paper with the municipal court, Josh, that the contract is going to end and we're going to get a new public defender. And I'm very concerned with that, and I'll tell you why. We're going to get somebody who's younger, and I need to make sure that municipal court has enough in their budget to hire and retain somebody in that position. I'd like to ask, if I could, Mr. Mayor, ask the judge, does he feel like his department has enough money for that? Because I feel like it's going to be maybe even, the contract will be doubled or maybe even tripled. So, Mr. Mayor, if I could ask the judge.
Your Honor.
Before I let the judge speak, so before that contract was nullified, there was 197, it was agreed upon that we were going to pay him, Cook and Associates or whatever, $197,500 in 25. Now we're kind of going back to drawing board, but I'll let judge speak to that.
$197,000, that's what the contract was?
Yeah,
For year 2.
For year 2, which is 2025.
Okay. So he has until
January, December 31st
of 2024 or
of 2024. The RFP is currently active. It should close here in the next couple weeks.
Okay, so what do you, so that's is that how much we have allotted for 2025? What do we have allotted, and how much more do you think we need, Your Honor?
Is that for me?
It's for Josh or whoever.
Well, I mean, if you break down Mr. Cook's numbers or the contract at about 2,000 cases per year that are appointed from our court to the court-appointed attorney, if you divide that at 190,000, you're at under $100 a case. Okay, that's in this market where we are in 2024. That's pretty unrealistic. If you were to pay $300 a case, just throwing a number out there, you're at $600,000. If you were to pay $500 a case, you're at $1 million. So the concern of whether or not we're going to be able to get a court-appointed attorney contract done by the end of the year, knowing the nature of, well, the lack of the desire of attorneys to want to do that type of work. If you're asking me to speak frankly, I think we're probably going to learn the hard way. If we have to pay 4 attorneys $60,000, I mean, that's on the low end, and I'm just speaking my thoughts here. This is my opinion. I mean, we're at 240. Is that over 197? Yes. So we're going to have some work to do. We sent out the RFP to, I think it was 700 people in the system. I myself sent it to, or got it to Ms. Bowling Leah, attorneys in Manhattan, Topeka, Lawrence, Kansas City that I thought would be interested. So we've done a good amount of legwork. I've got a meeting next week with Judge Ebert set up. He sat in my position in municipal court several years ago where they did a pay-by-case system. So I kind of want to hear his thoughts on it. But yeah, I think the 197 is probably low.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
I wanted to bring that to my colleague's attention for a couple of reasons. I hate to see Mr. Cook and his team go out because we were really getting a really good cost savings, and he's done it for a lot of years, and he knows a lot of the mentally ill people. Working there 30 years, you get to know that. And right now, there's just not attorneys. We're not spitting them out. They're not coming out of law school. Amanda can vouch for that. Am I correct, Amanda? So we have to make sure that this is in this budget. And I wanted to bring that to everybody's attention because right now we are at the low end. We can't afford that. We just can't afford that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I have for right now.
Mayor?
Deputy Mayor, is that you?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. A couple of things. One, there are going to be a revision to the no camping ban ordinance that Councilman Dobler and I are currently working on, but that's not going to be some magic wand. I think, honestly, Councilwoman Hiller, I understand you're trying to do your due diligence. I think it's very, very confusing to the public when, the city manager and his staff comes up with the figure and then you come up with the differing figure, and now we're working to, try to explain this as much to the public, what the actual numbers are. So I think that just makes it frustrating, at least for a lot of folks that are just trying to find the bottom line on what the number is. And we have good and dedicated staff. But at any rate, I think that it is short-sighted to, scrap the budget for abatement of camps, because even once that, if it passes that amended ordinance, until we get more affordable housing and until we get Built for Zero up and actually running the way it needs to be running, and with the help from the state, we're still going to have encampments. And hopefully it won't be that many, but to just strike dollars out of a budget before we even know what the ramifications are going to be with the amended ordinance, I believe is short-sighted. And I also believe there should be no cuts at all to any property tax relief, because that's, in some ways, it feels like it's almost penalizing the poor, and I know that that's not your intention. And when it comes to what Councilwoman Ortiz brought up, I think that there should be the dedicated funds that are needed for a new firm or firms that are acting as prosecutors. And I'm not going to go into that whole mess that led to some of this in the first place, because it'll be truthful and it will be really ugly. And I just think that we also know that we need to have that commitment to hire the prosecution folks that we need. And if that includes adding some extra dollars in there, I think that that is certainly called for. So thank you, Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Further comments? Councilman Duncan? Thank you, Your Honor.
I don't know who wants to answer these. I got a couple overtime questions. I'll start with fire, and then we'll go police, and then I guess, at this point, we're essentially, I know give or take, but fully staffed in the fire department, right? I mean, have we seen, I know that's relatively recent within the last year, but are we seeing a reduction in overtime, a correlation between being fully staffed and less expenses in overtime now that we're fully staffed, or no? If so, great, and I guess if not, why not? Let's start there. So I don't know who wants to answer that, whether it's the chief or the city manager.
Mr. Councilman, I'll answer high level. From what I understand, fire is working within their budgeted overtime amounts. I think there's always going to be overtime needed in fire for callbacks and things like that. But at high level, they're operating within their budgeted amount, and I'll allow Chief and Josh to add any other details.
So, as you mentioned, it's been pretty recent that we've gotten our staffing pretty much up to about as close to full as we could expect. So it's difficult at this point to say we're going to see this much reduction in overtime because we just haven't been full for that long. If we were sitting here at this point next year, I would feel pretty comfortable giving you a more direct answer. When we proposed our budget, we simply tried to we looked at the amount that we had budgeted this year and what we were expecting for increases based on the contract negotiations, and then a correlating amount to that line item. It may be a line item. We are operating, as the city manager said, within our budget parameters this year. We are a little bit ahead of where we were last year at this time, as far as being a little bit less utilization of callback for minimum staffing requirements on a daily basis. If the decision is made that we need to reduce on that sum, we're going to do whatever we can to make that work as best we can. I would just be a little leery of any type of significant reduction to that line item, just because I just don't feel like we have enough time yet to see how we're handling that.
Well, I think the reason I asked that, and police will be a little different here in a minute, but whether it's fire department or other departments is, I guess how I'd like us to track some of that is look at what the overtime costs are once we get to some of these departments where we consider them essentially fully staffed, right? Whether it's water, whether it's fire, public works in some of the departments. Because at some point, and I want the world to freak out and say I want to add a bunch of jobs, but I mean at some point there's a tipping point that says if I'm spending $1.5 or $2 million a year on overtime, but I could hire 5 more people for a total of $500,000 a year and reduce that cost essentially down to much smaller, that's a better way to go budgetary wise. Even though we're adding FTEs, it's saving us money long term. So I guess as we track that, that's really the heart of my question, is making sure we're looking at those offsets to save us money long term. So then my question to police is, I don't want to jinx anything, but assuming we get all these people through, which still does not fill our giant hole in vacancies, but assuming all these people make it through, and then realizing that about 6 more people are going to suddenly retire on us once they do. So it's not, I mean, is there any equivalency long term in your department that says, hey, if I finally go up a net 10 or 15 or 20 over next year, that reduces some direct overtime expenses? Because I know every department's different. It's not apples and oranges to everybody.
Yeah, we see a relationship in our number of vacancies and our amount of overtime. We've seen that increase over the years with apologies. With the number of vacancies. Our proposed line item budget is based on what we anticipate what we would have to spend in overtime to continue with the level of service with the vacancies that we have. The anticipation is with some of the moves that we've made and recruiting, the union contract and things like that, we hope to reduce those vacancies drastically, which then will reduce the draw from the overtime. But we are utilizing overtime to fill shifts because of shortages.
Right, and that's why, that's why I meant hopefully. If you look a year out and we actually fill half of those 40 slots.
It is hopefully, but the past numbers also
support it, that fewer vacancies, less overtime expended, and we've looked at that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Further questions, discussion? Now, I want to ask the attorney here. We have a document from the city manager presenting some changes. These aren't amendments that we're considering, or is this part of his overall budget presentation that include these changes?
The budget form in your packet does not include the changes that Josh presented from the city manager. If you would like those to be incorporated, you would amend the budget with your motion to say to incorporate the changes by the city manager with the direction to staff to fix the state budget forms before submission. Likewise, if you would like to go through each of Councilwoman Hiller's amendments in addition or an alternative, you would have to go through that process. At the end of the day, Josh has to submit state budget forms on the state form, and he needs to know what numbers to put in. So you will need to amend the budget form that is in your packet to reflect what you would like it to say.
I'm going to ask the governing, Councilman Duncan.
Okay, well, then, so let's start there. Then I will make a motion to at least adopt the proposed changes as presented by the city manager and staff into the budget. Not moving on the budget itself, just making the motion to adopt this portion of it.
I would second that motion.
Okay, you have a motion to adopt by Councilman Duncan, seconded by Councilman Miller. If you'll call the roll, please.
Okay, this is for the amendments. Councilmember Duncan?
Yes.
Hofer?
Yes.
Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Acala?
Yes.
Ortiz?
If I vote yes, is that at the 3% on the firefighters contract?
No, that's going to be the 4. Oh,
you can always adjust that later.
Yeah.
So, yes.
It was a yes.
Okay. Kale?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
And Dobler?
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes. The motion carries.
Councilman Duncan?
He's Dobler.
Oh, Dobler, I'm sorry. I was looking for you up there.
Yeah.
You're the facial.
Yeah.
Twins.
Okay, so if we pass the budget right now, as it stands with this amendment, we would be setting the mill levy at exactly what it is this year. We would not be raising the mill levy, correct?
Correct.
If I may take just a little bit of time here, I personally like a lot of the things that Councilwoman Hiller had on her list. I think there's some that I don't agree with. Homeless camp abatements, tax rebates, are a couple of them that I think we need to leave in there. But I think the overall intent of really taking a look at particularly some of the higher level of salaries we've got, a lot of them that aren't currently filled, and I think the question is, do we really need them? We've increased over the last 3, 4, 5 years. We've increased our I think FTE count some, but certainly the higher level folks. I like the idea of taking a look at the raises, whether it's 3%, instead of 5% or something like that. We've already decided, I think, for the most part, to leave the mill levy where it is. I think we can look at firm and some of the other things that are currently proposed to be bonded, to taking those back to cash as it becomes available down the road. And then, vacancy credits is really just a big guess at this time of year. So rather than going through all of these, I think we've essentially set the budget. We've said, here it is. Staff knows what I mean, they can project what that looks like next year and the year after and start making plans on how they're gonna reach it, knowing that there's not gonna be a big increase in the mill levy, if any, next year or the year after. I mean, it's just the environment we're in right now. People are hurting, people that are trying to buy houses, own houses, they're hurting from the taxes going up, and it's not just us, it's all the entities. So I think just within those parameters, we hire some really smart folks to run this city. We've got smart people, and you know, it always seems like no matter what that budget gets set at, people figure out how to live within that budget and provide the basic services that we need, police, fire, public works to start with, and then add in the other things as they can. I personally don't feel like we need to go through and amend all these things. I think we're sending a directive with this document to the city manager that we've got to start looking at the future. We'll make it through this year with this budget, and we may even make it through next year if some of your projections presented originally are right. But it's down the road that we're gonna be in trouble if we don't start looking at some cuts and some good things that have been outlined here. So rather than go through all these individually and try to put them in, I would suggest we pass the budget as it stands. And with that, I think I would make a motion to pass the budget as amended.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Deputy Mayor. Councilwoman, did you have a comment?
Well, I wonder I think the discussion has been good, but I wonder if we need to make a little stronger proviso just for the record on this. And again, there are lots of different line items in here, but if, the limit of not taking more than 10 million out of the unassigned fund and/or challenging the city manager to come up with another 5 million in firm cuts by December 20th, so that the list that's here can be considered. There might be other things as well, but at least we've got another $5 million out of that budget before the end of the year.
So if I may.
Councilman Dover.
Mayor, thank you. I think we've already, we have control of the unassigned reserve fund. Each one of those expenditures has to come before the city council. So we can essentially hold that $10 million level. Is that correct?
I don't
Does that
think
change
so.
with this?
With their budget.
So, if I may, in this budget, we had to for the purposes of this budget, we're gonna go ahead and transfer all of that back into the general fund, and the thought process behind, except what we already has been approved, which is $2 million by council. And the thought process was behind that was transferring it all back in, see where we end 25. If we're above 20%, some can go back in the fund. If we're less, we keep it in our general fund reserve. But that's ultimately, that's viewed by like our reserve policy balance. We combine our general fund reserve and our unassigned reserve as one reserve. So it is ultimately up to the governing body, but for the purpose of plugging this budget, we're using about $11.8 million of that, and then the rest are just going into the general fund reserve just to see where we land at in 25. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it kind of does.
It does.
All of it.
So essentially, the resolution that we passed
Would be
last
overridden.
year is gone.
Correct, it would be overridden by the ordinance.
That's what I've been so worried about.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a concern with that, because that really doesn't control. I think I would support a motion to only move $10 million of that into the general fund for this year. That would leave 1.8 million that you could come back and say, hey, we need. I mean, the purpose of that fund is it's a rainy day fund. And if the worst case scenario works out with this budget, as you've outlined, then it starts raining, right? And you come and say, we we need another 1.8 million or whatever it is for operating, and we could approve that at that time.
Josh, so the 20% reserve would still be, we would still maintain our 20%, or is it?
We'd be, with the lowering the mill levy, and we'd be under the 20%. We'd be around 19% with all of this.
And I guess our low end policy is 15%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we would still have that. I think what we're talking about is what would be above and beyond the 20%. And so we would not be at 20%. We would be at 18 or 19. So we would still have the rainy day fund above the 15%. So that would still be there. What we're talking about using a majority of would be anything that was above the 20% or the unassigned reserve. So anything above and beyond 20% is pretty much what we're using to fill.
I get it.
Right.
Yeah, I understand. It's
Okay.
just, at some point it becomes, the goal was to create a rainy day fund to fund operations or whatever it was, pay cash for things, and that whole ability goes away with passage of this. And that concerns me a little bit.
To clarify, Josh, that you would want to decrease by 1.4 million the budget authority for expenditures? Is that what we would be doing?
In regards to what?
If they don't want to allow the complete transfer? I mean, your expenditures have to match your cash.
Yeah, we would have to find an additional $1.4 million.
Correct. Or you would have to decrease your budgetary authority.
Yeah. And one thing I might add is we could always approve as is, because on paper, we're projecting, let's say, $11 million deficit. Let's say we get to the end of next year and it's only 9. It would be kind of like drawing out of a certain fund. Like Dobler said, we could come back, say, hey, this quarter, we're projected to be under this amount, and we can see where we're at the end of 2025. That was kind of the thought process.
Let me think on that just a minute.
Okay. Councilwoman Hiller?
That gets back to what I had on the front page, was if we actually have a $20 million deficit and we're going to use the entire fund, which is what's built into this budget, if I'm not mistaken, I mean, it was 11.8 million and you were counting on using 15 of that 11.8. And the way to get to that was to do some of that bonding and so on and add money into the fund before the end of the year by bonding things that we were going to do cash for. And then once we spend it, it's gone and our budget will grow and we won't have the $10 million fund. That's huge. So we needed to, understand that.
City Manager, did you have a response? Okay. Councilman Kell?
I think, yes, there are cuts that need to be made to the budget and things, but we have that storm cloud over the next couple of years on the horizon, and we need to really look at what can be done, because if costs keep on going up for us,
That's right.
and we just constantly looking at cutting, that's where more costs are going to go up, like overtime. Loss of projects where now we're not doing this project and now it's a year or two down the line and it's going to cost us more to do that project. Right. So we need to look at what we don't want to look at, which is raising the mill levy. I mean, it's going to be a situation where if we keep on trying not to do it, that there's going to be that 1 year we're going to have to really bump it up, and it's going to hit people a lot harder than if we bump it up a little bit 1 year, bump it up a little bit the next year. But if we wait for 3-4 years and then all of a sudden we really have to hit people with it because we've done all the cutting we can do until to keep the city operating, and because in 4 years we're going to have the union contracts all back up again. We're going to have, costs of this and costs of that are going up, and it's going to punch us in the mouth. And so we just don't need to look at cutting. We also just need to look at ways to generate from within by saving money by doing our own things, like we did with the beet juice on the roads and the signs and the sign department putting that there. But we're also going to have to look at the mill levy, and it's not something we want to do, but I think people would appreciate more if we hit them a little bit at a time rather than possibly hit them hard in 2, 3, 4 years. Because we've been pushing it off and we slash as much as we can slash. And then it comes to that point where it's got to be done. Thank you.
Councilman Duncan, go ahead.
Can we not use this net budget surplus as part of the offset?
Potentially you could.
I mean, if we're talking now again about another 1.4 million or 3 million, give or take, I mean.
At the end of the day, your budgetary authority for expenditures have to match your cash. So if you're going to decrease it by 1.4, you could, in theory, make that offset up by the projected increase, but whatever it is has to equal. So
Right,
it's
I'm just
either-
saying, I mean,
Yeah.
it looks like we have $1 million of it right here. I'm trying to close the gap without us having to get too crazy.
And Councilman, part of that was to do the offset on the vacancy credit so that it's not the full $3.1 million and something that we think is a little bit more manageable at that 2.1 or so $million. But I mean, we could, I mean, in theory, but I mean, I think the recommendation would be to put that towards the vacancy credit.
I mean, look, I could be very wrong about this, and in 4 months, everybody can look at me and say, you're a moron, and that's cool. I will live with what I'm about to say. But I've said this several times, and I know we have no idea what the economy is going to do. Regardless of what side you're on, the election is going to have some impact on some things economically. But I'm going to go back to the fact that when we sat here after the first quarter, we were rightfully concerned about sales tax collection, which was down a couple percent, and then we got the next, and we were up a couple percent. And while I know it is staff's job and your job, and I'm glad you're here to do it, is to remind us of the worst case scenarios. I mean, there's not been a year I've sat on this council where we haven't ended with some amount of money because of sales tax collections being slightly above what they were in previous years. So I'm very honest, there's a piece of me that even if I say that's on the low end, because the lowest it's been since I've been here is $3 million. So even if that's half of that this year, I'm kind of in the back of my head saying, based on projections I've seen, based on what the state collections have been the last couple months, based on where the economy is, based on cuts that are coming, inflation where it's headed, I personally believe we're going to end, not with a ton, but a little bit again that we can put back into that unassigned fund again. And so however we can make that look on the books, thinking that that's coming in, but I know that's Spencer looking at things and giving you his assessment of where I think things are going to end, that we would have some money to float either one way or the other through that unassigned reserve fund. So I'll just give you my bias on that, and that's part of what my thought process is I look for where we can give the state a proper budget that's balanced, but making some assumptions. Thank you.
Councilman Dobler.
Yeah, I think I've had a little bit of time to think about it. I mean, the reality is, and the city attorney just said it, we've got to present a balanced budget at the end of the day. The resolution on the unassigned reserve fund is still in effect, correct? So next year in March or April or whenever we figure out where we're at, if we've got 22% reserves, we're going to take that 2% over the 20 and put it back in the unassigned. And then it's up to us if we want to just leave it there and wait till the next budget session or spend it on firm or something else. It really doesn't matter. It's a big pot of money that we're spending out of, and I think we can control that. I think what I would ask is, and I know we have financial reports and things like that, but it would be nice maybe if we could have quarterly, not big presentations, but just quarterly updates in front of the council on where we stand, where are we in reference to our budget, and how much ahead are we. If we could do that every 3 months and we get a pretty good feel for where we're at. I'm sure it's all online there, but I'm not an accountant, and sometimes it gets a little bit difficult. So I think I'm good with where we're at. I do think that a lot of these things that Councilwoman Hiller's outlined need to be taken into account as we look forward to 2026 and 2027. Thank you.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll do you 8 times better, Councilman. I've asked the team. I know. Despite what others on the council may feel, I do intend to do monthly financial reports, high level, but yeah, I've already talked to Josh and the team about putting that together, so you'll be seeing that here coming shortly.
Okay. Councilwoman Hiller?
I based my recommendations on what staff told us. So Josh, I'm going to ask you again what I heard, which was a consistent expectation on your part that we would come in $2 million under short by the end of this year.
Yeah, so, and this was ran in early September. So on 2024, or let me back up a little bit. Our 2025 budget was set as a spending down reserves by about $1.4 million. So at the end of this year on paper, we were expected to have a deficit of $1.4 million, which we wanted to spend down reserves because we had a high 30% reserve rate at the end of 2023. We're projecting $2 million in expenses over revenues. Now, that's with funding the Dreams program with cash. If we opted to bond that and change some other projects to FFE at this early date, it would be about $500,000 expenses more than revenue. Now, that's also without half of your franchise fees, the last distribution of the property taxes, 6 months of sales tax. So there's a lot of revenue to still gain in through the year. And then obviously we have employee turnover. Maybe we don't fill positions through attrition. Don't pursue certain things to where that number is fluid, but at this early date, it's either $2 million, and if we opt to change cash to bonds, it'd be about $500,000.
Well, I wanted to say that just because that was this was based on, the staff's assessment that we were going to be short $2 million. And so just bonding doesn't solve that. And I just wanted to clarify that. And the other thing was that this budget was based on at first a $15 million that you all then modified to $14 million, that somehow was going to take that $11.8 million fund and make it 14 to balance this one.
The $15 million, when we presented on July 30th, that was assuming a revenue neutral rate because we were asked to present a budget, what it kind of looks like overall a deficit of a revenue neutral rate. Now, the motion on the table is exceeding the revenue neutral rate.
With the mill.
With the mill. So, yeah. So that's how the 15.
That's what brought it to
yeah.
14. But just so everybody understands, that's spending the whole thing plus. It's not anything left, and then it won't be there the next year with a budget that's even bigger. Just the rate, what it is.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I want to make sure I understand, Councilman Dobler. Your motion is to accept the budget as amended. And is it your thoughts that if it passes, that we would continue as a body to consider some of the suggestions made by Councilwoman Hiller and work through the year with city manager and staff to see what of those that we can look at seriously to help us as we move toward that effort? Okay. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could just put on the record that I do, to Councilmember Hiller's comments on the document, I do intend to have a retreat with you all, a couple days, to where we can really deep dive into this so that I can understand what your priorities are, understand the services that we can and cannot live without, understand even the revenues. I think it were even mentioned in here. There's some proposed revenues, fee adjustments, things like that we also would like to gain input from the governing body on as far as moving forward in future budgets. So I just wanted to put on the record that I do intend to sit down with you, just get you away from your busy schedules for a couple of days, and we'll work through this together as a first step going into the FY26 budget process.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, if you could just repeat, we've had a lot of discussion. I just want to make sure. I was trying to summarize it, but yeah, I'm sure you can do it better.
No, so the motion is to approve the ordinance as amended, and that's the amendments that was presented by the city manager, and then give directive to staff to work on those amendments and budget cuts that have been presented to by Councilmember Hiller.
Okay.
Sorry, and just one point of clarification, that also includes a directive to staff to fix the appropriate state budget forms and get them submitted.
Yes, right.
Okay,
Perfect.
if I may, let me clear again, get clear. Is there or is there not somebody else besides Ms. Twimlow who has already spoken?
Nope,
On-
we just
on
have
the
one
budget.
person on budget, yep.
Okay. Is it, got that? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Could I have a clarification on the end of the reference to my proposals is in that, and I didn't quite follow what was said.
Just that staff has the directive to consider your budget amendments as presented throughout this year, as he stated at a retreat or other means.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, just.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. We call the roll, please.
Okay, council members Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
council members Hiller,
Respectfully, I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Valdivia Akala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
and Duncan.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes with Councilmember Hiller voting no. The motion carries.
Thank you for the discussion.
Mayor, I just have say one quick comment.
Councilman Duncan.
I think before he walks away, first of all of staff did a great job on this. I think we all believe that and support that. So I don't want anyone to feel left out. But 6 months ago, Josh was sitting here like third on the call sheet thinking, man, life is good. I just got to do work. I don't have to answer questions in front of these people hardly. And then everybody abandoned us, and he was the last man standing, and he's had to do all this work without more pay, without even the interim title. And he has done it, and he has taken everything we have thrown at him, put on him, and I'm sure there were nights where he was like, oh my God, why am I still here? So I just wanted to take a special moment to Josh to say thank you, because we could not have gotten through this process without you, and you deserve all the accolades. So thank you.
Okay, we'll move on with the agenda. Number 5, non-action items. Madam Clerk.
A is a discussion regarding proposal to amend the construction and licensing fees in the Topeka Municipal Code to implement biannual contract licensing.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the governing body, Rhiannon Freeman, our Director of Planning and Development, and Mr. Richard Faulkner, Development Services Division Director, will lead us through this item.
Richard?
So understanding it's been a long evening, this is not the presentation the spot you want to be in ending, so we will be brief. I think it's a pretty agreeable proposal, so I'll let Richard talk through what's being proposed here as far as our biannual licensing.
The Topeka Mayor, Council, thank you for your time. I
don't know if you're on.
There you go. Okay, yeah, thank you for your time. We're proposing to amend the Topeka Municipal Code on annual licensing. At the present time, our licenses are issued once a year. So that means that the contractors have to come in once a year and get their licenses, and we issue about 3,000 licenses a year, and they're all due at the same time. So we have quite a load of licenses to issue. So what we've been trying to do is to work through them and cut down on the time that the contractors have to wait on their licenses. One of the things that we've done, we've implemented online licensing where the contractor can go online and get their license issued to them that same day if they upload all the correct documents. Before we put the online licensing on, we would be working from December to March issuing licenses, renewal licenses. So with the online licensing now, we're getting it done in a month. So with us doing that, we're trying to increase our efficiency and getting the contractors their licenses a lot quicker. By going to a 2-year licenses, our goal is to break the group up. We have the 3,000 licenses that we issue, break the group up into 2 equal groups. and have them get their licenses for 2 years. So that should cut down on the time that we're issuing the licenses. Theoretically, if we're doing it a month now, if we cut it in half, we're looking at 2 weeks. So that's what we're looking at or wanting to get to. It also allows the contractors not to have to deal with licensing every year. They'll just deal with it every 2 years. And this will help us to provide them with a more timely service when getting their licenses. When we started looking at this, we reached out to all the contractors to get their input to see how they felt about it. We also discussed it with all the trade boards. We also discussed it with the BBFA. This proposal has also went to the Policy and Finance Committee, and we made them aware of what we wanted to do. We checked the state statutes to make sure that we weren't going to be implementing or any of the changes where it's going to affect any of the licenses procedures that they require. Of the communities that we compare ourselves to at the present time, the only other community that has 2-year licensing is the city of Manhattan. As I said, we took this to the trade boards, the BBFA, and the Policy and Finance Committee, and they all agreed that we should move forward with bringing this amendment to the governing body. I also support this proposal so that we can provide a better service to our contractors. And that's my presentation. If there's any questions.
Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. Yep, Policy and Finance looked at this. We did approve it unanimously. I have one question. Are these, and I didn't ask this during, are these dates when they renew an annual date or an anniversary date? Meaning, could there be some people who renew in February, others in March, or is it all January and December?
Annual date.
And is that?
December 15th.
Right. I mean, is that just because our system doesn't let us do it? I mean, it would seem easier staff-wise if we were doing it throughout the year based on anniversary dates rather than 1 month every year, 1,000 of them are getting it at once. So I don't know if that's something we can look at or.
Yeah, I think that I had talked with Rob Scott, our field service manager, and I think a lot of it was just for awareness, right? A lot of the contractors talk with each other, and I think everybody having a general awareness of when the time is to renew.
Gotcha.
Although it was a little bit of a nightmare, we got more renewals in, and it just made more sense.
Okay.
A
couple of things too. I know we're looking at all fees in the city. My recommendation, I said this at the committee meeting, was if this is a fee that's going to change, I would try to coordinate it with the same time because that seems to be easier, especially when you're going to 2 years. The other thing I'd like us to look at is a split year payment option, and this is how the state does it. So a lot of people have state, so they shouldn't throw them off too much. But if they want to pay all at once for the 2 years, great. If for their own budgeting purposes they would like it, if our system allows it, split it, pay the 1 year, the other the second year. But the second year they pay a little extra. So if it's I'm going to make up a number. If it's a $2,000, which this one isn't, then they pay $1,000 the first year. They pay $1,100 in year 2, but that's a choice they made to split it up. We get a little extra revenue. I know in general we did talk about, and I brought it up then, that a split payment option would probably help some of these folks just because of how they budget. So something to think about. And then the last thing is, and I said this to me, as many things as we can go to 2 years, I think is great. I think everybody appreciates it more. So as we're doing the fee, we're looking at all those fees and things, and anything we can transition to 2 years sounds awesome. So that was it. Just want to throw out those comments. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Gill.
Was a monthly, kind of like how the state does their license renewal for your plates? Was that looked at all? Because to me, if I think I saw something about hiring extra staff for that time of the year.
We used to. We don't do it anymore.
Why was it changed?
Because we didn't need the staff. We got online licensing, and we started issuing the licenses a lot quicker. We went from 3 months, that's when we hired the additional staff, to 1 month when we went to online, and then we didn't need additional staff anymore. And now we're looking to go to 2 weeks if we can do the 2-year licensing and split the groups up. So there was a time when we were hiring extra staff, but not anymore.
Okay, I thought I saw that somewhere, so that's why I was trying to look at it that way, to if we can prevent from hiring, just like we were talking, making budget cuts, if that's something we can do. But The only thing I don't like about the councilman's budget or idea about splitting up that is we raise that rate. You know, I understand that there's a chance we're going to get some more revenue by splitting it up, but the only thing I don't like about that is if we raise it past that limit and they've already agreed to pay this amount, then we're losing out. So I think, you know, just that one-time payment, and it makes it easier for them to remember, like you said, also remember that it's due, and we're not chasing anyone for owed money or anything like that. Just a one-time for the 2 years will save us a lot of headache also.
I could tell you that with our revenue, all of our department, or at least my department's revenues and our fees, that this will be something that we'll be spending the next several months. We've already got meetings on the books to scrutinize, look through, so we'll look at all proposals. So it'll definitely be something that has eyes on it.
Any other questions? Yeah. Just on those two comments that were made, I like the idea of staggering that you're talking about. I kind of like the idea proposed by Councilman Duncan. I think there are a lot of places that it's a convenience fee. And believe it or not, I'm sure you know that there are probably some that for them it's easier to pay half than to pay the whole. I mean, they can save for it or not, but still, sometimes the convenience for them to be able to split it up and make that cost burden a little less is something to consider.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Richard. Gannon?
Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to public comment, and we have two people signed up for public comment. Ms. Twemlow?
Signed up for public comment just in case my 4 minutes wasn't enough earlier. And I needed to say more things, which I do. I feel a lot of disappointment standing up here today, hearing some things that transpired earlier with using character as a way to decide whether we were going to give someone a break. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know Mr. Klossman at all. I'm sure he's absolutely swell. But I do know that when we're talking about equity, when we're talking about implicit bias, when we're talking about making decisions that are fair and right for everyone, your judgment about somebody's person should never be a part of it. We carry implicit bias with us. It's normal. We all have it, but we have to recognize when it impacts our judgment and makes things less fair for other people. We sat and heard just 2 resolutions before that 175 homes were going to have liens on them for a total of $119,000 of water payments, or whatever that source may be. $119,000 of, I'm assuming a lot of those people have really good character. Maybe not judgment by the millions of dollars they've made and spent, but the time that they spend in their community, the help that they maybe give one another, or just generally being a good human being. And I'm wondering why we haven't talked to them about how they have liens on their homes based on good judgment for $119,000. I feel embarrassed by that. I feel sad. I felt like walking out the door, because we come up here to talk all the time about how our community is hurting. Did you know right now that in our community, the rate of infant mortality has increased for Black babies to 18 deaths per 1,000? We've gone up high in the state, highest in the state. That's 4.7 times the rate of white babies born in our community. We talk about doing things to help our community thrive at the forefront, but yet we bring solutions and we're told that we're voted up here to make these decisions, or we're told bring solutions and then we bring them in. We're just always angry about things. And it feels really, really rough to then sit here and hear misrepresentation, to hear judgments placed on people and the things that they're experiencing as ways to disregard the help that they maybe need. And I find it frustrating. And I find it frustrating that we haven't been heard in a lot of these realms. So I hope as you're looking a little bit further in these next few months, we go back and listen to how the definition of community safety is much broad, how the definition of helping and reducing the costs that we are spending on things can happen by front-loading people power. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McClure.
Henry McClure. Before you start nicking the guy for his license that can't pay up front, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you give him a discount for paying it all instead of trying to hit him for $100 later? I mean, you guys don't know what it's like to be on this side of the fence to deal with the bureaucracies of this community. Think about it. You've got Benish, an engineer. Now I know why my Pizza Hut took 2 years, because between Benish's comments and the engineer going back and forth, spending $1 million a year. Plus from the taxpayer standpoint, you spent $540,000 to a consultant to help you sell the hotel. I mean, that's what the commission is. I'll market the hotel for you guys for free, because somebody's got to start standing up to you guys. And somebody said it earlier tonight. Well, some of the things you say are hateful. Well, Bill Haynes cost me $150,000 because he got more money for his land when I sold my land to you guys at. When Go Topeka bought my land. And you want to talk about a failed land bank, you bought land out here, it sat vacant for 18 years, and you spent $90 million marketing it. I mean, think of these numbers. The government makes Jim Klossman look like a great guy. I wanted a lot to develop that. Ask your buddy Joe Ledbetter. But all of Go Topeka came out and stood up against me when we were trying to get 49th Street paved. I mean, you guys want to control who gets the deal. You want to control, you're choking Topeka the way you do business. It's just like that little $100. Well, we're going to zing them. I appreciate what I've been very vocal against what's happened at Lawrence Bay. But today, at least the guy's standing up. But government, from my standpoint, government's the problem. Government is the problem. And it's a shame. I think so many things could be different. Like, there's so many investors that just won't come here and won't do deals here. I was talking to a fellow yesterday, or 2 days ago, knocking on doors, and he told me he brought a project to Topeka and went to the planning department. Now, this is a long time ago, years. But nope, we don't need any more of that in this community. There was some other stuff I wanted to say, but you need the $3.5 million that you spend to put it into infrastructure, the $5 million a year. You need to figure out how to get rid of $1 million a year to Benish, who are making it impossible to do business in this town. We got to engage local people. Thanks.
Okay. No one else is signed up to speak. We'll move on to announcements. Madam Clerk.
There is no council meeting next week.
That was quick. I like that. City Manager?
Nothing for me, Mayor. Thank you.
On a roll. We'll move then. Councilman Kell.
We've been having some issues in their neighborhoods lately and in our schools. And we need to go back to if you see something, say something. A lot of people don't say anything because they think it's snitching. I worked at a prison. I've watched plenty of shows on prisons. And guess what? The guys that are sitting in there, that's not snitching if you're the victim, if you witness it. It's snitching if you're an accomplice or something like that. But don't just sit there and not say something you're afraid you're going to be labeled a snitch. You know, if you're the victim, if you're going to be hurt by it, if retaliation is going to kill 5 other people, say something. Say something at school if you hear something about something going on. It's getting ridiculous that we've had like 3 or 4 in this northeast Kansas in this last week of school situations. And it's getting out of hand. People need to start speaking up. It's not snitching. If you're not the one doing it, you're not snitching. And it's plain and simple. See something, say something, do something. Because we're sending our kids to prisons now because their schools are just surrounded by gates and fences. And they can't move anywhere within the school. You know, and people can't even walk down the street now and feel safe because on Saturday night in my neighborhood, there's easily 40 gunshots. You know, it's getting so bad around here, and then people just aren't wanting to say anything. Like, well, I didn't see anything. They'll say everything on Facebook. Officer walks by, I didn't see a thing. And it's like, how are we going to fix these problems? Everyone just wants to stay quiet. You know, I'm going to be very upset if we have issues continuing in our schools, or young people continually get hurt because people don't want to speak. I'm frustrated at the school system even. Kid in Virginia got suspended because he didn't say something right that second. So, but we have to go back to if you see something, say something. There's 20 ways to be anonymous about it. You know, and then that way, the only way not anyone knows if you're snitching is if you go around and tell people you said something. So don't think of it as snitching unless you're doing the crime or doing the crime with someone else. Thank you.
Councilman Miller.
I didn't have anything, but just so we can make sure that everybody does know there is an avenue. Crime Stoppers, Shawnee County Crime Stoppers. That's a great way to report crimes and reporting things. So thanks for Kel for setting that up. Or not the Crime Stoppers thing, but just the conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Councilman Dobler.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got just a couple quick things here. You know, in my part of town, I think the biggest complaint I've had over the last probably 2 years is traffic enforcement. People running red lights, people speeding. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's one of those things that you start getting away with certain things, and maybe you look for the next thing you can get away with. So I just want to commend the police department. I've seen a lot of tickets being written in the last few weeks. Motorcycle units are out. Really the first time I've seen that in a couple of years. And it may just be my impression, but it seems like the speeds on Wanamaker are a little bit slower now because people are kind of anticipating the motorcycle or police car setting someplace along there. So Chief, thanks to you and crew for that. Really appreciate it. Second thing, I'd like to get a presentation, ask City Manager for a presentation next month on the EMS study, where we're at. It's been several months since I think we visited with the folks from Wichita State, and I think we need to get an update on that. And then the last one's just a personal thing. I've been out for a couple of months here. I had a little battle with cancer. I think Most everybody knows that. Thanks to some good surgeons and I think a lot of prayers on my behalf, it looks like I may be close to cancer-free. I'll know for sure in a few months, but that feels pretty good at this point. I want to thank folks for good thoughts and prayers, and particularly Councilwoman Ortiz, who took on my constituent phone calls for about 2 weeks when I was completely out of it. And I'll tell you what, she did such a good job. She may get votes that I don't get next time. But it's really good to have backup like that and a personal touch. So thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Glad you're back. Councilman Duncan.
Nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hofer.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
No travel log report. Nothing to share with us. Councilwoman Hiller.
Almost passed. I'm about to head off to what they are now calling Brown 5, where all the folks from the sites of all the Brown v. Board cases are now part of our national park, and they're meeting once a year to get to know each other a little better and explore those different sites, get to know the stories and the sites a little better as well. And the Park Service folks asked me to go along this year, so I'll be happy to represent and report what I've learned. But I think it's a kind of amazing thing for Topeka to be in the middle of that kind of development. The other thing that's happening with Brown v. Board, and I am also a seat at the table for that, is that with the broadening of Brown v. Board from being a national historic site to a full national park, and the inclusion of Summerton, South Carolina as a full site as well within that park, the Congress rewrote their enabling ordinance, and so they're looking now at how to fine-tune the language for what the interpretive programming should be out of the Brown v. Board National Park. And you think about it, it sounds kind of simple, but then what is the story? What's the story we're trying to tell, and how do we do that here? And we're the home of Brown v. Board as well. So just wanted to let you know that that's underway, and if people have some particular thoughts about what that interpretive approach should be, now is a really good time to have some input on that while it's actually being written, and we're in the middle of it in the country and globally. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I talked to Councilman Dobler, he said the most you're going to get is a pothole. That's what you're going to get in my district. And I want to report that I did not get one pothole report. I got some other reports out there. And I did have a lady tell me if she could vote for me, she would. And I said, this is kind of fun because I can piss you guys off and get the job done, and you guys can't vote for me. So it's all good. It's all good. But glad to see you back. Glad to see you up. I do want to say that for the new members that are here, October is my favorite month. October is my favorite month. And if you don't know why, you need to ask somebody. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. Ain't that right, Chief Phillips? October is my favorite month. That's a clue. That's a clue. I also want to say, I want to thank my guys, the firefighters. We had a young lady, her dishwasher caught on fire. Her name is Simone. She's one of my kids. I call my kids my kids. And she went on the news nationally, but I sent her a smoke detector application. She took the batteries out of one of her smoke detectors, and she had one downstairs, and it caught on fire, and it did a lot of damage. And we don't think about that. We start our dishwasher, and we go to bed, and that's what she did. But luckily, the firefighters got her and her two young children out safely. She's got a mess, but they have their lives, and so she's grateful for that, and wanted to tell everybody that she's really, really grateful for that. So anyway, it's not Halloween. That's not why. That's not. Thank you.
Okay, I'll keep my comments real short because we're about 2 minutes to our 10 o'clock limit, and so, yeah, and so we're going to have to extend ourselves. So I'm asking for the governing body to extend beyond the 10 o'clock. Councilman Miller has motion to extend beyond 10 o'clock, second by Councilman Kell. If you call the roll call, please.
Mayor Padilla?
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Akala? Is she gone? Ortiz?
No.
Banks is gone. Kell?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
Duncan?
Yes.
And Hofer.
Yes.
All right, we have 7 yes with Councilmember Ortiz voting no. The motion carries.
Okay, so there is a need for us to go into 2 executive sessions. City Attorney, will you read?
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 20 minutes to discuss employer-employee negotiations relating to one or more unions as justified by KSA 7543-19B3. The meeting will resume in this room of the Cyrus K. Holiday Building. The following staff will be necessary to assist the governing body in its deliberations: City Manager Perez and other staff he deems necessary.
Okay, you heard the need to go into executive session. Is there a motion to do so? A motion by Councilman Kell.
Second.
Second by Councilman Miller. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Sylvia? Okay. We will recess immediately into executive session. So if we can get the room cleared, we'd like to move forward.
You want the timer? No? Okay.
Ready? Okay, we've concluded our discussions in our first executive session. There's a need for a second. City Attorney, would you please read?
The motion would be to recess into executive session not to exceed 15 minutes to discuss one or more matters in litigation deemed privileged under attorney-client privilege as allowed under KSA 7543-19B2. The open meeting will resume in this room of the Cyrus K. Holiday Building. The following staff will be necessary to assist the governing body in its deliberation: City Attorney Stanley and other staff the governing body finds useful.
Okay. For the need to go into executive session, is there a motion to do so? I'll move. Is there a second? Okay, second from Councilwoman Hofer, who wanted it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Aye, aye. We will recess immediately into our second executive session. Yeah.